reconvene to open session. Only reportable item from open session was the board voted unanimously to approve the personnel summary, and copies are in the back of the room. Can I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, including time limits, please?
I move to approve the agenda, including time limits.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Pass, thank you. Do we have any public comment on the consent agenda? Does any board member or member of the public or any of the student trustees wish to remove anything from the consent agenda for purposes of discussion? No? Okay, can I ask for then a motion for the approval of the, oops, hold on. I lost my place.
7.
Thank you. No, we did that.
9. Sorry.
Okay, so can I ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, it passed. So why don't we move on now to the student trustee reports? Maddie, would you like to start this evening? We'll just go in that order.
Okay, so starting last Friday before break, there was the third day of SOAR training, which is Students Organized Against Racism, which was held at Drake, and they were really focusing on white privilege for that training session. And then for this week, tomorrow is Earth Day, and CDISC, our Environmental Junior Senior Academy, is going to be running a school-wide event for that. So they're going to have activities to do. So if people bring white clothing, then there'll be tie-dye and there'll be henna. And then also they'll be talking about CDISC and what that academy does, and then also the club, GSE, Global Student Embassy, which is another environmental group. We'll be talking about their club and what they do. There will also be a school-wide barbecue, which will be free for all of the students. And Drake will be having a no cars on campus that day. So we will be closing our front parking lot and advising all students to walk or bike. And then if students really do need to carpool, we will still there's some residential streets near Drake where students can park. But we're really advising all students to find other ways to get to school, especially because it's going to be a nice day. So it'll be nice to walk in. And then this Friday is the 19th anniversary of Columbine, and there's going to be a national, I believe, walkout, and Drake hopes to participate in that. So at 10 o'clock, all the students will walk out of school, and there will be 13 minutes of silence for the 13 victims of Columbine. And then hopefully people will make speeches and continue to talk about gun violence. And for this walkout, why it's different than the recent one is the push is to have students keep walking out and to fully leave school for the rest of the day so that it affects attendance around the country, so that congressmen and women will actually start listening to students. And then, on a lighter note, prom is coming up on the 28th, and that will be held at the Academy of Sciences.
Thank you.
Okay, so TAM had their spring sports rally before the break, and we have now started planning our senior farewell rally, which will be at the beginning of May. We're also planning our final TAM Unity Day, which will also be around the same time as this senior farewell rally. We are having a campus beautification event on Earth Day, which is Sunday, April 22nd. CTE, which is the TAM Theater Department, is about to open their Henry IV Part 1 and Part 2. It is set in modern time, like the costuming, not the dialect, that's still Shakespearean. And so it's going to be really great. I believe that some English teachers are going to be giving extra credit if you go see it. The junior class is having a fundraiser on April 27th, where 5% of all proceeds at Swirl and Juice Girl are going to be donated to the junior class to help pay for their prom. The seniors start ticket sales for our prom on Monday, and that will be a one-day rush where tickets will be $75, and then it goes up to $80 the next day. So we're hoping to get a lot of money on that first day. On Monday, we are starting a penny wars between the grades to raise money for Doctors Without Borders. And ASB elections are going on. And this year, for the first time, we opened up ASB elections to all students rather than just leadership students in the spirit of TAM unity. Because in the past, there'd been a very close, election between president, but then secretary and treasurer would run unopposed. So we're hoping to have so we are having every position opposed this year. So that way the students actually get to decide and it's not just leadership voting. And spring sports are in full-fledged, still doing great. Mock trial is getting ready for their national competition, which is in later May. And TAM is still really happy with the journalism department, which has been partnering with the feeder schools like Readiness and MLK to try to get people that aren't typically in journalism into journalism when they come to high school, and also to raise the English standards for the students at those schools, because we have found that students from MLK and from the Billina-Stinson districts have performed lower in the freshman English classes than Mill Valley. So this program, started by Mr. Steinhardt, we're hoping to really improve the English at TAM, and that's what's going on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where are the nationals for the mock trial? Do you know?
I don't.
Las Vegas. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, at Redwood it's been fairly quiet because of vacation, but we're finishing our state testing and working on getting all the people to do makeups who didn't test, and we're preparing for our AP tests. Our spring sports are doing really well. As of now, our men's baseball, tennis, golf, and lacrosse teams are all in first place in MCALs as of now, so we'll cross our fingers. This week, leadership's doing a California high schools voter education drive where 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register for state and national elections. So we're hoping to get a lot of people registered so that more voices can be heard. We did affirmative consent training for all the seniors before break. In leadership, we're also doing a fundraiser to donate money to LARCOD, which is an organization whose goal is to help vulnerable children, youth, and women in the region of Kenya. And we're doing it in an interesting way. This time we're having 4 glass boxes set up, and then on each box there's an image of our different grades, president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. I'm forgetting what those are called. But basically, so there's freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and whoever gets the most money, and then we'll get pied in the face at the end of the week. So hopefully that will do well. And then on the front of the Marin IJ, I don't know if some people saw it, but one of our students, Jaden Ramos, is working to make prosthetic,
I did see
fake hands and limbs for people who lost joints, is that what it's called? Lost limbs, yeah, lost limbs, and can't afford to get surgery to get new ones. So he's making them at home with a 3D printer. So it's super exciting. But yep, that's it.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the trustee reports.
I just wanted to ask our 3 student trustees here, do you know when the elections are for your positions?
Yeah. So right now it's the forms are available, but the elections will take place Monday, May 7th and Monday, May 14th. For the May 7th is for ASB officers and student and board rep, and then 14th is class officers and site council rep.
Thank you.
At TAM, the student trustees run with the class positions, which is in 2 weeks from now. Don't know the dates off the top of my head, but they will be happening in the larger elections rather than the ASB elections.
In the Drake Constitution, which we actually have been reviewing this year to make sure we're following it, it says that the Drake representative is a 2-year position. So,
Congratulations, Maddie.
thank you.
And at your schools, is it a hotly contested race? I'm sure they're talking about it up and down the halls. No, I'm being a little sarcastic. Yeah, either one of you.
Yeah. I talk about parcel tax and everyone's like, I want to do that next year. So I think we'll have lots. I think there'll be lots of people.
I got a question for Matt.
Get a life.
I think the 2-year idea is a really good idea. Whose was it?
I'm not actually sure because before we haven't realized that it was a 2-year position, but like I was saying, we're reviewing the Constitution this year to make sure we're following it and also updating it for what we're doing now. And it said that it's a 2-year position. So someone before now made it a 2-year position at Drake, and we just, I guess, didn't realize it. But now we're sticking to that. And yeah, I think it's a good idea because it's definitely a steep learning curve. And I think I think I'll be more informed next year coming back.
You could do it for 3 years.
If I am elected, yes.
Trustee for life.
We have a term limit.
Never leave.
All the ribbons.
Okay.
And San Andreas and Tamascal probably have similar time frame. I don't know. They're student trustees. I'm looking at Corey because he knows everything at San Andreas.
No, actually, we don't have a similar time frame at all. Since our students come and go, good example, Caroline is not sitting up there because she graduated early.
Oh.
So ours happens on an as-needed basis when we need to fill a position. And we like it that way.
Okay.
Would you like to start the trustee reports?
Yes, okay, so I'm just going down the bullet points. They're up there so people can follow. The strategist update, we worked with Whitehurst Mosher on finalizing the resolution, which is on the agenda tonight, so I'm not going to talk too much more about that. The fiscal advisor and LCAP committee met, and that is also on the agenda tonight, but I just wanted to, for the other board members and whomever else is interested, to give my version as an observer. I thought this past meeting, which is the third one I've been to, the dialogue was very frank and candid, and I think people are getting more comfortable with each other. So the discussion is it's a very engaged discussion, and people, I feel, are expressing their frustrations if they have them, and I think it's been very productive. And so I think that what we're going to be talking about later on the agenda will reflect the conversation that happened at the last meeting, which we've got a ways to go. I'm hoping a lot of people on this LCAP fiscal advisory group will stick with us as we continue to work on solutions. So we'll hear more about that later. Golden Bell, I say this every meeting, is May 24th at 4:30 at Dominican. So hopefully everyone can come. We do have Golden Bell honorees. And David, I don't know if that has been communicated to the whole community. I have their names here. I can read them aloud, or we can do it at another time.
Do we know if that's been communicated?
The schools are communicating that on an individual basis. We have nothing district-wide.
So it's public, if that's.
Yes, it is public.
So if I read their names now, it's okay or not?
I can't speak for all the principals if they've announced to their staff yet. I don't know.
Okay, then I'll be quiet. But we have a great pile of people who are getting honored this year, and one of them is sitting in the audience. So I'm just going to shout out, Greg, thank you for all your work, and congratulations. That's San Andreas. Okay, and you're out. Additional updates, I met with the Tam High Foundation Executive Board. I wanted to touch base and try to talk to trustees more regularly. And I think that's a great idea for all of us, all 5 of us, to try to come up with a way to improve our outreach to our community. I know that several of you have met with the TAM Executive Board as well, but I'm also meeting with them. I think Michael and I are going tomorrow night. They have a bigger group, bigger meeting tomorrow night, and they wanted an update on what's happening in the district, so we will provide that for them. I also attended the Marin Coalition event, during which Leslie represented the district very well and spoke about our parcel tax efforts. So, good job, Leslie. That was a well-attended event, and it was Leslie and Cost Representative Mimi Willard speaking about the challenges that we face in the district with taxation. That's all I have.
So I'm not sure where the dates go, because we had a bunch of meetings. So I also met with the TAM Foundation, representatives of the TAM Foundation Executive Committee, and also participated again in the LCAP Advisory Committee. But we're going to talk about that later. So.
Okay. Thank you.
The only thing I have to add is that I too attended the Marin Coalition event, and again, I'm very grateful for all the effort, all the detail, all the time, the preparation that went into Leslie's participation in sharing with that particular community where we are and what our plans are and what we've accomplished. Mimi Willard was also present, giving information from her point of view and the point of view of those whom she represents. It was a tough audience, but I think that, again, the effort that the board and colleagues are making to be as transparent, as knowledgeable as possible in a swill of an awful lot of information and a lot of decisions to be made under difficult circumstances. I think a lot of credit to Leslie for leading us through that. So thank you for that. And I would also urge that we will be attending, I hope all of us, the Marin County School Boards Association annual meeting, where I believe RX Safe Marin will be presenting, because we all need the most updated information about the services that organization presents to all of us, particularly at this time.
Thank you. So I, too, met with the Tam High Executive Committee, and it was very helpful, and I look forward to meeting with parent leaders at the other schools as well. I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about tonight, and it, in part, is a result of probably what's gone on in this district the last couple months, and been given it a lot of thought. You've heard me at each board meeting apologize to anyone that I hadn't responded to yet, and to tell you that I will be responding, and that the board is reading every single email that we've received from you. And the Marin Coalition presentation was an effort to provide information. The theme was, taxes, or do we reduce the services? It's a dilemma that not only our county is in, but the state. And so I spent the first half of the presentation describing all of the services that we provide, and then went on to describe what we've done so far to address the squeeze that we're feeling with the increase in costs and the less of an associated increase in parcel tax, property tax, and then what we plan to do moving forward. So it was big picture, but from this, what I have come to realize, and Dr. Yoshihara, the superintendent, and I've had various discussions about this, is that it's common in organizations that you think that everything is really clear to everyone because we have a website, we have board meetings, because we don't really hear from that many people. And then something happens, and people aren't aware that you think they're more aware than they are, and that kind of sheds light where the engagement with the community needs to be improved. It just didn't really hit the mark, but there was no way of knowing that previously, and it's something that we kind of have two parallel efforts. One is, this community engagement, and that's really not just transparency that, yes, we have it on the website, but a person should be able to find it on the website. It can't be a scavenger hunt to get information. And in addition to that, it has to be a two-way conversation. So then that brings us to the board meetings. And board meetings aren't really community meetings. We're really supposed to be talking to each other. It's the board doing the district's work. When we give the superintendent direction to go take action, he does the work and then comes back and reports to us. And so we're not here to engage with the community. It's not a community meeting, and that makes it really awkward. At the most, we can give clarifying responses and then maybe follow up after. So we're clearly missing some pieces here because we need to have that. And I know Dr. Yoshihara is working on that now with having an evaluation performed of our communication methods, the website. How do we really make sure that people are getting the information they need? And it sounds like it would be easy, but it's really not. So we know it's a problem. We're working on it. It really came clear is that usually the board doesn't get 150 emails about librarians' positions, and well over that of just general concerns and the full range. We have heard we've heard the full range of opinions about our parcel tax plans, how big it should be or how small or whether we should do it. And then that brings us to our challenge as board members that we were elected to represent the whole community. That's what the district is. It's over 75,000 people. It's not only the parent community. And we have to, and that's what we were elected to do, is to take everyone's, how they value our school district, what they value. We take that. We take that, seriously, and we have to really consider all the factors. And so, on one hand, it's so helpful to hear from students, parents, community leaders that come to these meetings and hear from you, and I really, really appreciate it. We've also been criticized because of the underserved that don't make it to the meeting at night, and we're asked, do you listen to them? Do you listen to them? They're not here. They don't even know what's going on. They just, how fair is that? So these are the kind of things that we struggle with as a board, but keep sending your emails. I'm hoping we have a better approach as we move forward. And like I said, Dr. Yoshihara is looking into it further of ways that we can have a kind of a parallel path, because like I said, board meetings aren't ideal two-way communication, and we're where we need that. And going along what Laura had said about trying to get out in the community more, we are trying to do that. But really appreciate your patience. And one thing that did come to mind is, I can't remember what the function was, but it was with a group of teachers about a year ago, and somebody was describing to a new teacher that in this community, be prepared, because you have a community of very, very, very involved parents, and they are going to show up at your doorstep in your classroom if they're not happy with what you're doing, and they're going to be right there in front of you. And the teacher said, I prefer that than not having anybody show up. And that's what it's like for us as a board. It's on one hand, it can be very challenging because we're hearing such diverse views and want to be responsive, but I'm really glad that we live in a community that has this much care, because that's why we have the school district that we do. You know, we have great teachers and great staff, and a lot of that is we have this full community that really values our education. So even if you've written letters that aren't pleasant, I thank you. And just thank you for staying engaged and sticking with us. And we will work towards a better way of communicating. And I know we're going to get there together. So just thank you, everybody, for working together with us. Thanks.
Okay, I have just a couple of things to report. After Sue Fox came with her group at the last board meeting with a couple of groups of students making presentations, I went to the Sustainable Energy Fair a couple nights after that. So those two groups of students were presenting at the fair along with about, let's say, maybe 5 others. I was really impressed. The students were most of the students were deeply knowledgeable about the topics that they had taken on in sustainable energy. I would not be surprised if at some point a group of Drake students appears with pitchforks before this board. There clearly is an instance of solar panel envy at Drake High School.
A solar panel.
And it's like, we can put them here, we can put them there. So we haven't heard the last from Drake on
Well, that's
solar
good.
panels.
That's good.
And just a few hours ago, I was at Tamalpais with the AP Comp class. They were doing presentations on marginalized and underserved communities in Marin County. Heard a couple of presentations. After it was over, I had a half-hour discussion with one of the students who was presenting. Really impressed. We talked about the historic precedents of basically segregation in Marin, their knowledge of redlining, restrictive covenants, discriminatory lending, realtor-enforced residential segregation, blockbusting in the 50s and 60s. We talked about the Rumford Fair Housing Act, then the attempt of the California Real Estate Association to overturn that with a ballot initiative, and then the Fair Housing Act of 1968. I was just unbelievably impressed, at how knowledgeable, this student was, and unbelievably impressed about how knowledgeable some of those Drake students presenting were. You just, came out of both of those feeling really, really good about what's going on in this district.
Very good. Thank you. Dr. Yoshihara.
Well, welcome back, everybody, from spring break. We're now in the last stretch here. As Chuck was saying, we're already into May as he's looking at calendaring some stuff. So as we know, the recommendation from the LCAP fiscal advisory is coming forward later this evening. I also want to share with the board that we know that the fiscal challenges that we'll be presented with will be with us for the next couple of years. It won't be solved tonight, and it won't be solved by next month. I also want to share for the board and certainly the public that we've been without a chief business official now for almost 2 years. We're very grateful to have Terry with us in the interim. who's helping us with our budget. We have many other challenges, including enrollment growth. We're doing lots of work around equity. We have a new curriculum with regards to science and history, social science coming our way. So there's lots of really big moving parts that we're faced with ahead of us. At the same time, as President Lundgren mentioned, Harlander, excuse me now, mentioned, we have a need to keep our community informed about the issues and activities that are going on across the district. I get that. I think the board gets that, and it's something that we want to do better about. So all this on their plate, I reached out to the county office for essentially some administrative support. What can they do to help us? I know Mary Jane has been very gracious in the past, has lent us resources to help districts, including ours in the past. So in conversation with the board president and the county office, Mary Jane Burke has offered us the services of Walt Buster. Many of you know Walt Buster. He appears off and on throughout the district. He's a local resident here, grandparent, I think, to assess us in these specific areas. He basically will serve as a special advisor to the district to provide support in these specific areas that I mentioned earlier. He will attend board meetings and work closely with myself, the board, and cabinet. As I already said, we know Walt's investment in this community, and we hope it's an easy adjustment. Certainly, I think it should be for him. He should be working with the district starting on April 23rd, I think more visibly. Again, he's been around off and on in the past, and hopefully attending our future board meetings, the ones that he can make, starting with May 8th. So again, I've spoken with the board president on this. He seems to be supportive.
Yes,
So.
and very much thanks to Mary Jane Burke for, providing the ability to have Walt help for these next couple months while
hope
we're,
so.
moving forward with these agenda items.
All right.
Can I say something about that? I'm representing institutional memory here. When Walt first was our superintendent, it was his vision and his leadership that established what we now have come to understand and long-term sustainability around project-based instruction and preparing us for that. All these cliches about the 21st century education, but it was Walt's vision and his implementation of that got us going. So I am very grateful that we're going to have his professional expertise to help us guide us through all these complications of these decisions. So thanks for that.
I had a question for you, Dr. Yoshihara, about evaluating the website and communication systems. Is that what Mr. Buster, I like saying Mr. Buster, will be helping with, or will that be another individual?
I think he will help with communications, but as President Harlander said, I'm working also to get hopefully a consultant to assist with that. That's not quite ready yet, but at the May meeting, we'll introduce that to the
Okay,
board.
great.
So,
Will that be an agenda item then
it
in
will
the
be
May
an
meeting?
agenda item.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Moving on, communications?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We have a number of communications and emails from Mr. Price, parent, dated March 23rd regarding the budget deficit. Email from Mr. Chico, community member, dated April 9th regarding Drake High School survey. Email from Mr. Zalian, teacher, dated April 4th regarding global studies. Email from Mr. Mackay, community member, dated April 6th regarding Marin Coalition event. Email from Ms. Miller, parent, dated April 6th regarding team program. 5 emails from various folks regarding athletic trainers. 16 emails from various folks regarding district librarians. 5 emails from various folks regarding the wellness program. And then an email from Ms. Wilkinson, parent, dated March 19th regarding gratitude for Tam High School principal. That concludes the communications.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now's the time that we invite members of the public to address the board on any item that's not on the agenda. And so I'm going to read you the statement that's in the agenda in front of you. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and provides this time for members of the audience to address the board on any school-related matter not on this agenda. The board can take no action at this time. Each speaker is requested to identify themselves prior to addressing the board and will be heard for up to 3 minutes. The presiding officer of the board shall determine, based on time constraints of the board, whether some time less than 3 minutes shall be allocated to individual speakers. Can I have a show of hands of how many people would like to speak? I know I have one yellow card here. So we've got 3 or 4. So we can do the 3 minutes tonight. There's been nights we've ratcheted it down to 2, but we can go ahead with the 3 minutes.
Leslie, could you just clarify that, because I think there's people who might be here to speak about issues that are on the agenda?
Oh, I said that earlier. Did you understand that when I was saying issues on the agenda, this is not when you talk about that? So you cannot refer to the resolution having to do with the cost recovery plan. Does everyone understand that? Are you talking about other issues?
But there will be an opportunity
Right,
when
I'm
those.
sorry, yeah, this is for, just right now, it's for things, anything to do with the parcel tax resolution or the resolution on the cost recovery. We'll hear when that agenda item is. I will let you know if it looks like you're starting to get into that territory, but I will invite you to make a line then and be ready to come to public comment. We'll start that now. I have one yellow card that somebody said the topic is employment process. Are you still out there? Yes, thank you. And if you could provide your name, please.
Yeah, my name is John Brooks. I'm probably one of the unpleasant letter writers. I was classified staff at Drake High School for the 2016-17 school year last year. I'd had a pretty good life and career up until 10 years ago when our daughter and only child, Casey, a Redwood senior, right here, leapt from the Golden Gate Bridge and disappeared. The life I once knew was over. It took years to reassemble the wreckage of my life that will never be completely healed. So I devoted myself to saving other lives, especially kids. I joined the fight for a suicide barrier on the Golden Gate Bridge. We won. I led a teen group that opened up conversations at high schools and middle schools about mental health issues like depression and suicide. I published an award-winning memoir. As a second act, I worked in the school system and I gained a lot of friends. Then I was hired for Andrew Least's SPED group at Drake. Though my training was just names and room numbers on a piece of paper, I adapted, took any issues to Least with my recommendations. He always agreed, told me to chill. Drake is a chilled place, right? I like the work. I like the community. I like the people. I really like the kids a lot. But at the end of the school year, I was fired by Least and Chad Stewart on the pretext of an utterly bogus performance review. Just insulting, offensive, and ridiculous. It was a smear. Can anyone explain that to me? Who treats people like that? Was this just like petty politics? So here's an observation. When you hire someone perfectly, and by the way, this comes from someone with many years of experience in senior management. When you hire someone perfectly capable of the work, who does it well, adds to the community, works to be well regarded, then claims to have issues that are unclear, never give a courtesy heads up to correct anything supposedly amiss, then pull the rug out for no reason. In my world, that's called abysmal leadership. So try to avoid that in the future if you want a better outcome. You're welcome. Oh, here, you can have it. Hold your applause.
have some comments about parcel tax and the process. Is that on the agenda?
I think that's considered an agenda item, so you'll want to wait, but thank you for checking. Do we have any other public comment? Okay, with that, we'll close public comment and move on to trustee considerations. The first item is with Dr. Tartopiev.
Good evening, everyone. So tonight, I just want to talk a little bit about, as we enter LCAP season and updating the LCAP, some information that's available on the new state dashboard, the LCFF data dashboards, which we've spoken about in these meetings before. But most specifically, what we have available to us now is the college readiness information and updated EL progress data. So I just want to speak really quickly to those two pieces. Again, I'll be presenting this more formally in May and June when we bring the LCAP back. But I did want to highlight that 2 years ago, we augmented our services to our English language learners by increasing staffing and creating cohorts of teachers that could support our English language learners. And this year, they have shown a 7.5% increase on the California English Language Development Test, which means moving at least one level on that test. So there's a positive outcome to our efforts. With that, the state is implementing a new assessment, so we'll see what that looks like in the future. As for college readiness, this is sort of a complicated formula that we've gone over in the past, but just really quickly, this is based off of various pieces of data, such as UC, CSU, A to G eligibility. So those are courses that you have to complete in your 4 years to be eligible to apply and attend. Our CASP or SBAC, the assessments that our juniors take, it's based on that data. It also includes graduation rates. It includes technical education coursing, programming, the number of students who complete pathways and sort of things like engineering and computer science. So it's sort of a combination of things in there. And we have our first college readiness scores this year. And as a district, we score what they call very high, with 73.5% of our graduates in 2017 being deemed college ready by these measures. However, the disaggregated data shows us areas of improvement, particularly for our English language learners, who only 28.6% of graduating students who were designated English language learner in 2017 were deemed college ready. And our socioeconomically disadvantaged students who graduated in 2017, only 31.8% of those students were deemed college ready. So we're hoping that AVID is one of those programs that will help improve those scores. And I'll get into this a little bit more in detail. We also have all of our disaggregated suspension data, which is an area for improvement for us. But we have posted the latest data on our website. The front page of the website, it says TUHSD LCFF data, dashboard data. And it's a PDF with all sorts of data. And it's those little pie charts that look like Trivial Pursuit. It's that data. I do want to mention one more thing that is a point of pride in our department, and that is that Dr. Kim Stifler successfully defended her dissertation on Sunday, April 8th.
Congratulations.
That is all I have for tonight.
Do any board members or student trustees have any questions?
Yes, with the improvement in the ELL students, is that reliable data in light of our sample size?
They'd only give you data if you have more than so many students testing, more than 15 students testing.
Okay.
Barbara?
Yeah. Tara, would you please update us on the activities that our administrations are pursuing in light of improving attendance? I know it had an effect on
sure, yeah.
SBAC.
So I think as the board is aware, and the public may not be, we have a new attendance policy as of January 2017, which looks at attendance rather than unexcused absences. So we're sort of trying to look at attendance holistically. It also takes a more affirmative approach, sort of positive reinforcement. So a few things that some of the principals are doing is through our new Blackboard interactive communication system, sending out monthly attendance data to all parents, like, hey, this is how many absences your students have. So research indicates that parents don't keep the cumulative in their head. You know, it's a day here, a day there, and then when you say, hey, Tara's been absent 10 days, they're like, no, and you're like, here they are, 10 days. You know, even though that data is available, when you send it, people tend to be a little more attuned to it. So we are also going to, I believe, start robocalling. That's the automatic call at the end of the day on tardies as well as absences, which was something that came as a request of us. And I think one of the things I said to Barbara, I think we've had pretty good participation rate on the SBAC, which I think is indicative of pretty positive attendance too. It's not easy to get 95% participation rate. TAM has exceeded that. Redwood is sitting right about 90% right now. They're not done testing entirely. And Drake is, I think, right around 85%, and again, still trying to get some makeup students through.
My next question is, in light of potential changes to the teacher leader model, which you and Ann Jaime have
You
worked
might be
so
able to ask
hard.
that during the resolution.
Yeah, okay. I'll do that. Okay,
Sure.
Tara, I just wanted to commend you for putting the information on the website. It's looking a lot more colorful and easy to read, and I know you've been behind that. So thank you for trying to make it easier to navigate. I know you have a lot on your plate, and at this point, we don't have a dedicated district website person.
We do,
so-
it's me.
Yes, yeah, I know. So it looks much better, and thank you. And
Yes,
I
thank
will
you.
go check out that dashboard.
You're welcome, thank you. And it's nice that the state is now producing these things in easy printable PDFs and stuff, so I thank the state for that.
Thank you, Tara. Anybody else? Yeah, go
think
ahead.
Jake has a question.
Earlier, you said that parents would get calls if their kid had missed like 10 days of school. Is that like for excused or unexcused or both?
Either.
Oh.
It doesn't matter, right? So that designation is no.
Did we stop having those calls for a year? Because I got them like freshman and sophomore year.
The robocalls?
Yeah.
On tardies or absences?
Both. I got them on
Oh,
both.
they still go out.
Oh, okay. So are we just bringing them back, or same thing?
They still go out.
Okay.
To your parents, hopefully, not you.
You get
Right.
them all the time?
It's
think
because
your
your
principal
attendance
is
is so
here.
good, Violet, that you don't get them anymore.
I know those.
Violet, would you speak into the camera, please?
See, we've improved Violet's attendance tremendously in 2 years.
From the calls.
Anybody else? Great, thank you very much, Tara.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Resolution 17-14. Dr. Yoshihara, and I believe Jill Godleb. Did I say it right? No.
Golub.
I knew it didn't sound right, is in the audience if we have additional
Yes,
questions.
thank you, members of the board. So we are here tonight to discuss Resolution 1714. This has been a long process in the making for our community to know that the board has been having the discussion for probably the greater part of a year since this has begun. Here tonight is the formal resolution to be considered. There are two versions for consideration, and in discussion, we labeled it A and B just so we can have delineation in the dialogue tonight. The only difference between the two versions reside around the exemptions that are provided. In the A version, the resolution calls for exemptions for seniors, those over age 65, much as we have provided in the past in this district. So the exemptions for the A resolution is exactly as offered in the past. The B resolution adds two additional exemptions with regards to SSI and SSDI I won't get into a lot of specifics, although that's all spelled out in here. That is new for the district and allows additional exemptions for those individuals who show evidence that they fall into those categories. There are some districts who utilize this. I don't know if it's the majority, but there are some that utilize it. Dixie being the one that I'm most aware of currently that has a very similar exemption in their proposal to the voters. I do want to thank, before I get further into this, President Harlander, Trustee Anderson, Joe Golub with Whitehurst Mosher, who have put in a lot of time behind the scenes in getting us here today as well. Many eyes have looked at this over and over and over to get this here to us today. There are a couple things in here that I do want to point out, and I'll just use A so we can be on a common page. Again, the only difference between A and B have to do with the exemptions as they relate to SSI and SSDI. So the 75-word language, in particular, the amounts that we chose, the board has provided direction on, state that with those conditions, I'll read it here, I think, just to be clear, to provide high-quality education with local funding that cannot be taken by the state, shall Tamalpais Union High School District attract and retain great teachers, provide excellent science, technology, engineering, math, reading, and writing instruction, and maintain small class sizes by renewing local funding at the current $293 per parcel rate and adding $149, providing $15 million annually for 12 years with senior exemptions, annual cost of living adjustments, independent citizen oversight, and all funds for the Tamalpais Union High School District students. The $293 rate, while different than the $285, basically just assumes a 3% increase, of which would be expected of parcel tax holders anyway under the current parcel tax. So it's not an increase, anything beyond the 3% escalator. So that's where the $293 comes from. And that $149 was provided as direction from the board at a prior meeting. We estimate that provides $15 million or a $5 million increase over our current roughly $10 million revenue, local revenue that we receive. The term for 12 years was, again, as per board direction, even though we tested higher and showed that that was supported, acknowledging sort of the input received to consider 12 years, and that's what we have here. Annual cost of living adjustments is defined further in the language of the text to be 3%. So if the voters are unclear, for clarity, the 3% is in there. Independent citizen oversight will be new. In the prior bond language, parcel tax language, there was not an independent oversight. So we do intend to have that should this pass. Let me then, so that's the actual language itself within the 75-word ballot. Moving on, also I do want to thank Roy Given with the tax collector assessor's office, as well as his counsel, who worked with us through this process as well. The date of levy with regards to this is November 6, 2018. So the day after the election is the date that this levy would be imposed upon the parcels. So for purposes of when we would realize revenue, we would begin the levy the day after. We spent a lot of time with regards to collection of the tax, and that's under number 5. I'm going to talk a little bit about that just so the board is very clear and the community is very clear on the impact that this will have essentially to the parcel holders. The collection of the tax, and early on there was some conversation about when we could realize the revenue and when we would receive the funding. And so, again, much thanks to Roy for supporting this. And he does support this. He's reviewed the language. His counselors reviewed the language. Essentially what it is saying is that while the levy will occur the day after the election, the technical challenges of trying to collect in that year or within that fiscal year would not only be challenging but problematic, in that in all likelihood the tax holders, the parcel holders, would have made their initial payment, and so therefore they will have lots of questions about why a supplemental bill is coming while initial payment has been made. So what this essentially is proposing is that with the 1920 fiscal cycle, okay, so this is happening in the 18-19 year, the ballot measure. So in the 1920 fiscal cycle, it gives the authority for the tax collector to collect for the 18-19 fiscal year and the 19-20 fiscal year at the same time. So in a one-time collection, they will be collecting in arrears, and then going forward, it will be annually thereafter. We would recognize the cash, so to speak, in arrears, which our business person Terry is well aware of, and may involve some short-term borrowing, but nonetheless does advantage us in that we would be able to collect for the 18-19 fiscal year. So that's a very important piece, and that's outlined in number 5. So we will collect in the 19-20 year for the prior year, and it will just go out as a supplemental bill. Other than that, most of the other items in here are fairly straightforward and mirror language that has been used in the past. I don't think anything else is worthy of note. This does require a supermajority of the board. It requires 4 out of 5. Personally, Superintendent, I would recommend that we not consider this unless there's 5 out of 5, but in terms of passage, I do want to clarify it's 4 out of 5 on something like this. Jill is here as well to answer any questions, or if I said anything incorrectly. But I'm happy to entertain questions. I know there may be some public comment on this item as well.
So what I was envisioning, that first the board and student trustees, if you have specific questions, go ahead and ask those. Then we'll open it up to public comment, and then we'll come back and have a discussion after we've heard public comment with each other if we need to. Does that sound reasonable? So any student trustees, do you have any questions right off the bat?
Yes.
Or do you want to come back to you? Maddie?
Yes, I do have a question. I was wondering how you're going to communicate to the community the collecting the tax for both years in 1 year so that people can plan accordingly.
That's a good question. So absolutely, in regards to, that's part of the reason we're having Walt and the conversation around communication. This is a big undertaking. There will also be, if when the board formally passes this, a separate committee that's formed that's essentially tasked with sort of the advocacy piece. The district will still be involved in the informational piece, so we'll work with them in getting the information out to the public as it relates to this through, again, they may decide on things like mailers and other avenues of getting those information out. So that's to come. We certainly think that's an important piece to do. So.
And just to clarify, it's the part that will be felt is the additional $149 per year. So it's a little under $300 that they'll get the first year, and then it'll drop down to the additional $149 the following. So it's not the entire parcel bill, but yeah. No, but you raised a really good point. It's something that I know Dr. Yoshihara has been discussing. So.
Yes, we first had to make sure the tax collector could do it.
Yeah.
And once we got his, says I can do it, then all right, let's
he has the same concerns. Because he gets phone calls too, so, yeah.
Good questions. Other questions?
Anyone specific? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a collection question, and I was
Okay.
on the subcommittee, so I just want clarification for all of us. So in assuming that the parcel tax passes, which we're going to assume,
Sure.
after a lot of hard work and lots of community effort, we will levy the tax at $442 for our fiscal year 1920 plus 7 months from November 7th, 2018, the day after the election, to June 30th of 2019, which is about 7 months.
Yeah.
So I think if I did that, so I just want to be clear on what that extra amount of money is that is going to be collected on our tax statements. So we
Right.
have 1920 for 442 plus 7 months, in essence, of 1819. And if I just divided 442 by 12, or do we just divide? No, we divide 293 by 12.
So I think I understand your question, and I'll see if Terry and or Jill know. So I think your question is what percentage of the $5 million increase we would get in that 18-19 fiscal year.
Yeah, and I think it's relevant because
Yeah.
everything is so.
Say again? No, what collected in 1920, would we receive the 5 million or a fraction thereof? That's what I thought too. So we would receive roughly the $5 million. In other words, it's not 7/12 of 5 million. We would receive the 5 million because the levy happens in that fiscal year. That's my understanding. And that's, again, we've checked
That's what he
some on that.
explained when we met with him.
Yes, that was my understanding from the tax collector as well. And again, the attorneys who looked at this.
Okay.
So, yeah. Again, I haven't heard otherwise. I had the same wondering about as a pro rata, but everybody I've talked to says you would receive that amount.
So 1920, I know, was an extra $5 million,
Yes.
but the 1819.
We would receive it in 1920, but it would be roughly $5 million as well.
Plus.
We can double check. I mean, essentially that's what you're asking is, would it be a pro rata amount? But my understanding it's the full amount.
So in 1920, about 10 million more, and then it would drop back down to about 5 million more the following
So
year.
we would get 10 in 1920, 10 million.
In terms of cash
19
flow, yes, we would receive an extra 10 million for cash purposes, 5 of it being from really the year before. Yes.
Can I follow up on that issue?
Yeah, please do.
So, I'm not a tax guy, right? But if you look at paragraph number 7.
Paragraph 7 on.
Paragraph 7, I'm looking at the one, I guess I'm looking at B, the one with the SSDI.
Okay.
So it's on page 5.
Okay. Collection of tax, okay.
Collection of tax, right.
Go ahead.
So, and if you go down to the second sentence, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down in the middle line, the special tax due for the portion of the 2018-19 tax year accruing from November 7, 2018 will be billed by the county tax collector on tax bill issued in 2019-20. So the way I read that, it's accruing from November 7th.
That's
So
how I read it.
we're getting a proportionate amount of the tax, of the increase in the parcel tax for that period, which is what Laura was
That's essentially her question.
saying, but that you're telling me, but what you said is contrary to that, as I understand.
From when we checked on this, there was every indication that we were receiving essentially the 5 million. I'm happy to go back and double check.
Because the way it's written, it looks like we should only get 7 of the 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
Not
thinking of a
12.
pro rata, but perhaps parcel taxes don't work that way. I'm not a attorney on sort of this piece, but we're happy to go back and check that piece. But we've asked that question. I've asked that question. Terry's aware of that.
Because originally, what the plan was, it was always going to be this election day. And originally, the tax collector was looking at the option of sending out tax bills that completely showed what people owed from the previous deposit and the second. And they had to retract the tax bill. It's not a supplemental that goes out, which is why he couldn't do it. And he was very clear that he would be billing literally for the whole tax year. But I understand the way this is written does appear the other way, but he was adamant with us that
We were clear on that.
Yeah.
And just to, as a reminder, because it just clicked, in an earlier iteration of this, we had July 1 as the date of levy. The county council was not comfortable with that. He feels that to levy before the voters take action could be problematic down the road. So our council agreed, and that's why it's now the day after the election. And that's when I brought up, so does that affect the revenue for that year? And again, they said it does not. Again, I'm not a expert on how parcels are actually taxed, but it would appear that if it's taxed within that fiscal cycle, then you're able to tax that amount that the voters have approved. And it does state that clearly down below in terms of what those amounts are. Again, I'm happy to go back, but I remember the idea of July 1 is to essentially get the full year. And when moved to November 7th, I said, does that reduce the amount that we would receive? And they said, no, it doesn't. Both from the county and from, again, people I've talked to on these matters.
Okay, so just to clarify, so 1920, if the parcel tax passes on November 6th.
In 1819, yes.
Yeah, November 6th, 2018.
Right.
If it passes, then when the tax statements come out in 1920, we should, in the district, expect to collect an additional $10 million.
That's my understanding.
And then for 2021, it would go back to just an additional $5 million above
Yeah.
what we're getting now.
Yeah, roughly, right, with your 3% increases, but yeah,
Okay, thank you.
correct.
Go ahead.
So am I to understand that I'm going to look at my bill and I'm going to see a double whammy at some point? Is that what's going to happen?
In 2019-20, you will see an increase on the increase, on the $149 amount.
149 times 2.
So in 1819, because you're already paying the 285, which will become 293, you're going to pay that anyway in that cycle, so they just got to pay that difference. So it's not, as President Harlan said, it's not a double, but that
Okay.
increase will be added.
Okay, so when I'm looking at 149, I've got to think double that for my for my 1920 bill?
Correct.
You will have that, yes, you will have that
Okay.
for 2 years.
And this goes back to Maddie's question, which was also mine. This is, if we are struggling with this up here, we're going to have to make sure that it's very clear to the taxpayers why they're paying
Yeah,
what they're paying.
Yeah, in terms of the collection piece, in terms of what they're voting for, it's very clear that they're
Yeah.
approving that piece. But yes, the collection piece, and that's why we spent a lot of time on this number 5 collection, number 7 on the B.
Do you have more? Because I have a couple of questions. In examining trying to get a sense of what what the material difference is between including the additional exemption for folks who are on permanent disability and not including that.
Yeah.
So do we have any kind of estimate as to the number of parcels or the number of households or the number of people who would be affected by that, and an estimate of what reduction in collections there would likely be as a result of including that exemption? And then lastly, I'm going to ask what are the political considerations we should take into account in deciding whether or not, as
Sure.
between A and B with respect to that issue?
I'll take that, and again, please, Terry and Jill, if you want to add. So again, the SSI and SSD are new with regards to this B version. It has not been in our old version. In the initial iteration that was presented to us by council, it was included in there. And when I asked the rationale for this, the comment was, in general, is seen as a gesture of goodwill, and that sensitivity to low income and those in need who would qualify on this. Again, these are sort of fixed income situations. And so therefore, it allows an exemption other than the senior exemption. I've shared that the Dixie School District, which is now doing a mail-in ballot, has this also as an exemption in there. So I do know other districts. The East Bay, when I was looking at that from Mimi Willard and some of the recommendations for the East Bay on the square footage, some of those have the SSI, SSDI in their piece as well. When I reached out to the tax assessor, if they can give us some indication of how many this would be, they were researching that. As of today, I haven't heard back from them. My best estimate is this is a relatively small number for a couple of reasons. I think to be on a fixed income in Marin County is a challenge with considering the affordability. You either, I'm making some broad assumptions, either had to been here a long time, in which case you may already qualify for senior exemptions. Again, we're not taking that away. And or you may be in some kind of rental kind of situation, which are not subject to parcel tax anyway. And so, my best guess on this is that the numbers who would qualify would be relatively small. I don't know if Jill or Terry have anything you want to add for any estimation? Okay. So again, if I get that from the tax collector's office, I'll let you know, but he was researching to see if we have data on a county level that they can share with us on people who are actually receiving those benefits.
Has this become, I mean, is this just becoming best practice for people who do this? Or have there been particular political considerations that?
No, to be clear, this was not something that we put forward. This was something that we've heard from, that I think that came from the community and council as an option. You know, we wanted to give the option, you know, in our subcommittee meeting, I think we went back and forth on it and wanted to give the option to the board. I have not done a measure with this in it. I don't think it has political liability, but I don't know how many parcels. I mean, that's sort of outside my area of expertise. But from a political perspective, I think there's some goodwill to be gained, and I don't see a political liability to it. But that doesn't answer your financial question. And no, I don't. I mean, of the districts in the county, Dixie, I think, is the only one that has it. But I can't say that for sure. It's not. To answer your question, in my experience, it is not standard.
And with respect to Dixie, it is the election that's going on now.
Correct.
So there is no past experience with this particular privilege.
But I just don't see anybody criticizing the measure for having it. But it's a financial question, which is what we said when we met, and why the superintendent was doing that research. And I don't know the answer to how many parcels that would impact.
And she was right in that the committee went back and forth on this, and I think where we left it is the whole board needs to have this conversation to see where they want to land with those exemptions. Just again, because it was brought to us, we vetted it around. I don't know, like I said, if we have recommendation, when the strategist brought this to us initially and they polled, this was not obviously in the polling. We originally tried to get it into the 75-word question. It would push the wording over. So the 75 words, as you know, is even on the B section, the 75 words only says senior exemptions. And that was important in the polling, so that stayed in there, even though the language within the body provides the other exemptions in the B piece. So we brought this for the full board to consider here tonight between the two. I don't know if we have a leaning either way. Essentially, what strategist presented to us was the A version. It was I think in all fairness, it was the attorney when we ran the final language back to him that he put those in. And I think again he may have had some experiences with that in districts he's worked in as well.
I have a question. I think it's a follow-up to Michael's question, and it's in relation to the second part of 1714B that's different, the Social Security Disability Insurance. I wanted the whole board to hear what we heard in the subcommittee, in that I was concerned that if we went with 1714 version B with these two additional exemptions, that it would be more work for our district staff to parse out who qualifies for disability and who doesn't. And I was hoping that you could share with the board what Leslie and I heard in terms of that being a pretty set formula, like you have to qualify to be on Social Security Disability Insurance. That's a set number, and our TAM Union district staff won't have to be dealing with a lineup of people who are trying to convince them that they should be exempt from the parcel tax because of their disability.
Yes. Yes, these are all regulated by federal and state guidelines. The people who qualify for this have certain documents that are readily available to them. So staff just essentially has to verify that that's who they say they are on these documents to qualify for the exemption. I think, and you can add if you had something else to add. I think one of the things I just realized, could be a challenge for us is that if our feeders don't have this exemption, that may confuse the parcel tax owner, because they may say, well, TAM gives this exemption, why don't I get it? And I think Jill is right. The feeders don't have this exemption. So the board would just have to reconcile with that this is different than our feeders. So while they may be exempt from having to pay the TAM high parcel tax, for the typical voter, it may all be the same. It's like, why am I exempt here and not here? So that, again, that is a difference that we would have to reconcile. So didn't occur to me until now. That could further make the voter wonder why, you know, so.
Any other questions? Or do you want to?
I have a question.
Oh, okay, question, go ahead.
In terms of goodwill, and I think those of us who attended the Marine Coalition meeting would agree that there's sufficient concern about fixed income in this county, given parcel tax demands. So to what extent can you comment that goodwill is worthy of honoring in this case? Can you?
I don't know, from a polling.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I know that it came up at the coalition luncheon, and we talked about that at length. And going, you know, one of the things we talked about putting a winning measure on the ballot is one that has minimal to no opposition. And if the board felt that including these, you know, was not only a gesture of goodwill, but might secure additional support from people who might not support the measure otherwise, then it would be worth considering.
Thank you.
I think it's almost fair to say that calling SSI or SSDI an income is a stretch because the payments are so low.
Right.
That anyone who's on that is really stretched out.
Right. Any other questions from the board or trustees before we open it up to public comment, and then we'll discuss it further? So now we're asking for public comment on this resolution. You're free to stand behind the podium and form a line. Please identify yourself before you speak, and you'll have 3 minutes, please.
Before I start, is the topic of budget cuts?
No, this is the parcel tax, this one. The cuts is the next agenda item. This is the actual parcel tax.
All right, then I have a short comment about the parcel tax. My name is Joe Price. I live in Mill Valley. I'm the parent of a TAM sophomore. I'm the treasurer of the TAM PTSA, but the following comments are mine personally. So the tax, I'm in real estate. So the tax year goes from July to June. There is no way that a parcel tax that will generate $5 million over a whole year will generate $5 million if the levy date is November 6th. I am not confident that this has been explained to you guys and clearly understood. The second issue is, it doesn't seem to me, I understand it's a small number. I believe it's a small number of the people that would not be paying this tax because of SSI or SSDI, but it doesn't seem right to me that this board is about to vote on this when a question like that cannot be answered.
Thank you. Any other? Would you like to go next, sir?
Dan Oppen, I'm a parent of a sophomore here at Redwood. 2 quick questions and then 3 statements on this. First, I know this is about the parcel tax, but it's impossible to have I guess, what's the plan for the budget, even if the parcel tax goes through? That is, you can't discuss a parcel tax being revenue without thinking about the expense side. You shouldn't even be voting on it without discussing the expenses and the overall plan for the budget. Clearly, a larger increase would allow the full funding of the schools and gradual rebuilding of reserves. At this level, likely wouldn't occur. Secondly, what's the timeline for rebuilding the reserves? If it's just a $149 increase in the parcel tax, if you try to rebuild the reserves during the time of the bulge enrollment, likely means that you would negate the impact of this increase in the parcel tax, which would be unwise. A couple of statements here. First, it's more than just parents who care about the schools. Clearly, there are parents of students here. In addition, people live in the community and take pride in living in an area that does support the schools. Secondly, people know that their real estate values are enhanced by having good quality schools. Those real estate values then support property taxes. And secondly, it's important to remember why the district is in this position now. These budgets and the deficit, they've been forecast for the past 3 years. All 5 board members have served since at least 2015, superintendent in place since that time. So taking action long before now, during this 3-year period, would have helped so we wouldn't be in this situation now. The district, students, teachers, parents, the whole community has been harmed by this delay. Please consider voting for a larger increase that will allow the full funding of the schools to continue, or if not, publicly state that you'll wait to rebuild the reserves until after the enrollment bulge.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tracy Van Hooser, and I'm a parent of a Redwood sophomore, and I have 2 at Del Mar Middle. And kind of to what Dan said about the amount of the increase for the parcel tax, it's unclear to me what the number would need to be to cover the enrollment bump. And as we go out to the community to communicate the need for an increase in parcel tax due to enrollment growth, it would be nice to be able to say we're going out for this number because that's what we need to cover us. And I don't really know what that number is, other than I think that the increase we're asking for is not sufficient. And that feels like a confusing message to the community.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Okay, back, members of the board, with regards to this item. So any further questions? And I don't have answers to the SSDI numbers at this point. We simply don't have that. I can reach out to the East Bay districts to see what their numbers are, but that might be reflective of what ours are, right? They have different demographics, different things going on. And we can certainly check on the pro rata amount as well. Again, I don't have that again, except from what multiple people have said, and we've specifically asked that question about moving it from July 1 to the November 7th levy date. And again, there are attorneys who've looked at this and people who have looked at this. So doesn't mean they didn't consider something. That's the information I have now on that.
And they provided that to you last week when this new language was inserted.
When it was
as I recall.
inserted, when we moved the levy date from, yes, from that. As the exact same question. This pro rata moving it, does that affect the revenue we're going to receive for that year? And they said, no, it'll still be the $5 million. So again, there may be something that they know that I don't have yet to provide.
I like the second version that has the SSI and SSDI exemptions. I know that our feeders don't, we're doing board meeting discussion here, so I do like the second version. I think it will engender goodwill, and I think it, even though we don't have the exact numbers of those who might be affected, it just feels like the right thing to do from my standpoint. Even if it's 150 people, that will make a big difference for them and will be a drop in the bucket for us. So I feel like it's a responsible thing to do of the 2 versions in front of us. And then in general, I think this parcel tax resolution has been out there, as Dr. Yoshihara said, for a year, and we had Godby poll 600 people and came back with pretty clear testing results indicating that the resolution before us is, has a strong probability of passing. It's not a gimme by any stretch of the imagination, but he recommended, of I think 30 or 40 years of experience, staying at that $149 bump and not going much higher than it. We looked at, what that dollar amount would be to address one of the speaker's concerns. It's not that much more than a $149 bump to close the gap. So I think demonstrating that we're doing this, going out for an additional revenue source, but also doing our best to tighten our belts here in the district, also feels like the right thing to do. I don't think we should go out to the public and ask for the whole enchilada. So that's my feeling. I like Resolution 1714B better.
Chuck or Michael or Barbara, any comment?
Yeah,
I agree with Laura. That's all I'm going to
Okay.
say.
I want to speak in support of option B with the SSI and SSDI exemption. I honestly don't think the numbers are going to be very big at all. One caveat in it, though, is that people do go off of SSI and they do go off of SSDI. So there should be annually. There should be documentation from each of the people who take that exemption. When you're over 65, you're over 65 for life, but it's different with the SSI. Unfortunately, with the age. And like Laura, I think it's the right thing to do. With respect to the $149 to the 50% bump, I would like to see a 100% bump. I'd like to see a 200% bump. I'd like to see this district fund equally to what other wealthy communities in the United States fund at. Like Shaker Heights in Ohio, Grosse Pointe in Michigan, Far Hills in New Jersey. I think, I've said it before, but I think, we are comparing ourselves to Nevada, we're comparing ourselves to Roanoke Park. But, the wealth in this, I think it's a disgrace, the wealth in this county and the willingness of the people of in the American West and the state of California to fund education. But that's the reality that we live with. And the polling we have is good polling. They were really accurate, with the last two parcel measures in the county. I am just deathly afraid to go out for more, because if we lose, if it doesn't pass, it would be catastrophic. Then we're looking at cutting $6 million in a year. That is not a chance I am willing to take with the kids in these schools and in this community. It does mean, that we're going to have to continue to tighten our belt. But I am adamantly convinced that we need to get what we know that we have a good chance of getting. And there's no guarantee that at $149 it's going to pass. We're still within the margin of passing and failing in the polling. So even to get our $149, it's going to take some heavy lifting to do that.
So I agree that of the two, that B is probably superior. I would have voted for A, but if we're given the choice, I think we don't know the specific numbers, but what Jill said in terms of political downside, I don't see any political downside to it. I agree. That seems like the right judgment, and the numbers are likely to be pretty small. With respect to the issue about whether we are going to be collecting the increase in the parcel tax for the entire fiscal year of 18-19, or just for the portion of the year from November through June. I guess one thing I would say is we've made the decision, which is clearly the right decision, to go out in November. We were not ready to do it in June. And I think frankly, it would be, for a variety of reasons, we're not the kind of district that, I like the fact that we're going out. I think it's frankly more democratic, the idea that we're going out at a general election in November than trying to have a special election where we're just having a mail-in ballot, which I think speaks well to, frankly, the integrity of the board and the district. Plus, it would be very, very expensive, given the size of our district, to conduct a special election where we'd have to bear the entire cost of the election, whereas at a general election, we only bear a proportionate share of the measures on the ballot, so that makes sense. By my back-of-the-envelope calculations, if we're able, assuming that it passes, the incremental increase for an entire year we estimate to be approximately $5 million, right? So it would mean $5 million of money collected in 2019-20 that would be accrued in our 18-19 budget after the election. If in fact we can only collect the taxes from November forward, that is roughly 58, little north of 58% of the year, which equates to approximately $2.9 million of additional revenue, as opposed to $5 million in additional revenue that we would accrue for 2018, 2019. I mean, I'm not going to complain, right? The fact that we're able to do it and collect it for 2018, 2019 is, assuming that we can make the case to the voters, that's a good thing. So I pulled up I just want to both Chuck and Laura have referred to the polling results, and I don't know how many of you were at the meeting when we had Mr. Godby.
First meeting in February.
Yes, first meeting in February, when he presented his polling results, February 6th, I think it was, and we had Jill, you were there too, and we pressed our, I mean, that's why we hired these political consultants, right? To look at sort of, we're not political experts. We have to make the decisions, but we did ask them to go out and poll. And so the ultimate results after, the ultimate results of the polling was really pretty stark. And it came down to, there were two levels of parcel taxes that were the subject of the questions. And one of them was for a proposed doubling of the parcel tax, which would increase it by adding $285 to the existing $285 tax. And the other was adding $143. The proposal tonight is for $149. So and of course, we have not to forget that we need 66, right? We need 2/3 in order to pass, right? So the poll indicated that if we were going out for a parcel tax, for doubling of the parcel tax, we were at, even after making all of our arguments, we were only at 64.8% of approval ratings. And maybe somebody can recall, I don't recall what the
Standard deviation.
What the margin of error was for this.
3 to 4.
Wasn't it 3% for November and 4.5
Yeah.
for June?
Right, somewhere
Jill
between 3
knows
and
that,
4%. So we could be at, we were at roughly 60% or so on the downside of that, And by contrast, our approval ratings for an increase of $143, which is much closer to what's being proposed tonight, was 73% in the polling data. So even if you assume, with the margin for error, that every one of those voters would vote against the parcel tax, we were still north of the 2/3 requirement that we need to be at. So again, 64.8% for the double, not including the margin for error, 73% for, so 8 or 9%, difference. And, given that sort of, to the extent that we're taking into account that information, in my mind, that's pretty significant.
And Michael, everyone can't see what you're looking, I'm looking over your shoulder, but explain that probable yes, that, so even though it's 73% with only a $149 bump,
It includes, right, it includes definitely yes and probably yes. It excludes probably no, definitely no, and people who don't pay attention.
but we have a high probably yes number. So that's not a slam dunk either. We need to work hard to get all those people that are probables to say, yes, definitely.
Right. So the other two considerations that I think are relevant with respect to this particular issue, I mean, there's many, but the two that I would sort of point out is we represent, point has been made, we represent the district as a whole. Although we have many members of our community who are very generous and who are frankly, affluent, we have a large district with more disparate socioeconomic base than some other districts, and in particular with respect to some of our feeder districts. And I think we need to be, and all of these people are our constituents, and I think we need to be mindful that this is more of a burden, this is, on a relative basis, this is going to be more of a burden on some people than it will be for others, and I think we need to take that into account in making our decisions. And lastly, this is not going to solve our budget problems, right? As public comment has made and has been discussed. We have to be more, we have to do as well or better with less. We just do. And we're going to have some hard decisions to be made. And frankly, the decisions that we're making tonight with respect to reductions in spending are insufficient. Even if you assume this is going to pass, given enrollment growth, given increase in pension contributions, and as we said, in special education costs, for example. But again, it's part of our job as a board, not just to ask for more money, but to reduce our spending. To be right, we are stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, and so I think overall, taking all of those factors into account in the balance, I think this is the right decision, and I'm prepared to vote yes in favor of B.
Thank you. I don't want to repeat too much of what's been said, so I'll keep it brief. I concur with what my fellow board members have said, and kind of building on what Michael was just commenting on with the community of voters that we do represent. We have to remember the poll is the poll. It wasn't somebody telling us what they thought. The numbers were there, and they tested it by, it was a cross-section of all the voters. And we know that this pollster, he did the Kentfield and he did the Mill Valley, and his predictions were pretty darn close. And they ran very good educational campaigns. And they tested calling people up and asking them point blank what they cared about education, what did they care the most about, what they could spend, what they were willing to spend. Then they were informed that there could be layoffs. It was actually a second pool that they asked that same question of. So we do have data for people that are aware that we would have to have cuts. And so if we think of it really simply, we have over 76,000 voters. These are people we represent. We just polled them and said, what do you care about with the education? Whether it is real estate, whether your grandkids, what is it you care the most? Is it the science? What is it that you care about? And then how much are you willing to spend? What can you spend? And we heard back, and we can't ignore that. So we got a poll of how we can represent our voters. And I agree, I would love to, I wish they had said, oh, we can double it, but they didn't say that. And so then we get down to the uncertainty and the risk. The poll's the best certainty that we have. The risk if it doesn't pass, which if it doesn't pass, it just shows we're not reading our voters very well. If it doesn't pass, exactly what Michael said will happen. And that's a pretty big risk. And it's really not our money up here to be risking that way. And so I agree with my fellow board members, and I agree that I prefer the version that accounts for, the disability exemption. I think it's just the right thing to do. And we have, it's just very important. And as Michael said, we're all aware. We've been working on budget cuts and the budget for the last couple of years. We've been doing it hand in hand. So it's not going to be easy. That's why we're working collaboratively to get there. So I agree with what everyone else has said. And
I had one additional point that I wanted to make to the board, and that is that, what was it, a year and a half ago, we were learning about facilities issues, and after getting that draft facilities master plan, we, as a board, decided we felt it was a higher priority to get our operational budget stabilized and go out for a parcel tax instead of a bond. But I think that we need, as we're considering this resolution tonight, to keep in mind that we do have facilities issues out there, and to be more conservative, going out for a 50% bump instead of a bigger bump is also a very responsible thing to be doing, because in all likelihood, before this parcel tax expires in 12 years, if it passes, we will be going out to these same taxpayers and potentially asking for them to pass a bond to help us out with our facility. So we're tapping into the same taxpayers.
but not a 300 million. We're not making that comment.
No.
I just want to
and
make that very clear.
Yeah, no, never considered 450 million or whatever it was out there. But $17 million parking lot probably wouldn't have flown. But yeah, I just think that we need to think about that too, as we think long-term.
Challenges ahead, but, yeah. This isn't the final solution.
No.
So would anyone like to make a motion? Oh, students, do you want to? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Violet and I were just. Okay. So, fine. I was wondering, what counts as like a disability that would let you be excluded from the parcel tax? Like, would mental disabilities count? Like, am I going insane? Like in option B?
No, I don't know. This is a good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure what qualifies as a state
If
disability.
you're on disability,
I think what's important is that we're not making the determination as to whether someone qualifies.
That is a good point.
So you can relax, Jake. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, we're not making the determination. It's
No,
it's
it's
made,
the state.
right, it's made by the
state,
by the
yeah.
state.
So we don't know if it's physical or mental or.
I could probably, my guess is it could be both.
This is way outside of my expertise,
Yeah.
except personally, but, so if my understanding is that if the federal government has regulations, so if you can prove that you cannot work because you have a mental or physical disability, and there's, a lot of criteria and a lot of paperwork involved in that, then there's some very small amount of money that you can get from the federal government.
No matter what age.
Yeah.
Correct. It's not, yeah, and as Member Ford said, people can move in and out of that. So that's why they need to check on that more often than the senior exemption, obviously.
Thank you.
any other student trustee comments? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move that we adopt resolution number 17-14B, the resolution of the governing board of the Tamalpais Union High School District proposing continuation and increase of existing parcel tax, establishing specifications of the election order, and requesting consolidation with other elections occurring on November 6th, 2018.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is this a roll call vote?
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
Aye.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
And Ms. Lundgren Harlander?
Aye. Thank you, that passed.
Thank you. Thank you to the board members who've worked so hard on this.
So I think you're still at the podium, Dr. Yoshihara? Yes, thank you. We're now moving on to item C, 16C, approve LCAP Fiscal Advisory Committee recommendation.
So thank you, members of the board. This next item is also an important one for consideration tonight. There's some background. I'm going to emphasize some of this background because that's essentially what was provided here tonight. There are no additional attachments. So as a bit of a recap, bringing us here tonight and this stage in the process goes back more recently to a January 31st board workshop in response to a letter in which the county office directed the board to pass a resolution indicating a plan to reduce the structural deficit. The conversation on January 31st had issued a target of $3 million in reduction for the 18-19 fiscal year, so next fiscal year. And the board had supported that recommendation on January 31st. February 13th, the LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group had its meeting, the first one since post the January 31st meeting, where began the discussion and generation of ideas to address the deficit. Resolution 1711 was then adopted. I'm skipping a lot of steps here because I just want to highlight some of that. Of course, as a reminder, also during that time, I had met with a number of stakeholder groups, staff, parents, community, in that interim process. But then on March 13th, with the meeting of the second interim report, as outlined by the county office, the board approved Resolution 1711 and provided further direction for the LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group to drop the recommendations for me to bring to the board here tonight. That it was stated that it would come no sooner than the April 17th meeting. In that time, it was emphasized, as there was lots of community input and feedback that we received from the March 13th resolution, to clarify that no decisions had been made. There was a process to be followed, and while certainly there was some conversations around what particularly was being discussed, no decisions had been made. The LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group continued to meet on March 28th and again on April 5th to discuss potential reductions as per the Deficit Reduction and Recovery Plan. As I go through this, I'll invite Tara up at the end if she wants to add anything as it relates to process. But at the April 5th meeting, there were several committee members stated, even with the additional information provided throughout the course of this, they were not prepared to make an informed decision on the reduction. They needed more information, so we get that. They just were not felt informed enough to make a reduction of this impact and this magnitude. However, the members did state that they felt comfortable with staff making recommendation, given that staff had provided input on some of the items being reduced or suspended. The LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group had picked up on staff had already had some conversations, as we need to in this process, outside of the committee group. Union leadership, staff had said, yes, some of these items had already been discussed in regards to how it could be actualized and what it could look like. So certainly there were some conversations already happening, and based upon feedback given that night, the committee, again, as it states here, felt comfortable with staff making the recommendation. We then did a vote on an anonymous ballot. That was important so that people could feel safe and comfortable, and 80% of the committee members approved the recommendations that are then outlined below. The committee does agree, and we got to that point as well, that further reductions, as I think will occur here more tonight, are necessary, and that either this current committee or a new group will need to continue to look at this. There are some conversations, and we acknowledge that the makeup of the group may need to be considered, as well as how to bring information to the group will need to be considered as we move forward. Next steps, again, as stated in Resolution 1711 back in March, are that the LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group will work with Superintendent and my staff through the November timeframe, essentially preparing now for the results of the election and then be ready for first interim at the December meeting. I did have conversations with Tarina Mars subsequent to this as well in regards to what's her expectation and what can we expect between now and the road ahead. So she also agrees, also in conversation with Terry, the interim director, that the next major reporting period will be the budget adoption in June, pending sort of what happens here tonight. June, essentially, we will present sort of, essentially, we've moved on then into the next fiscal year, as the board knows. In June, we're adopting the 18-19 fiscal year and looking at the 2 out years. And so the county is essentially looking at whether they're going to approve or not approve that budget. A little bit different than the interim reports, where we're dealing with sort of positive certification, qualified and negative certification. And that to realize further reductions, the committee needs to continue the work. We can't just put it on pause and pick up and just say, we'll wait for the outcome of the parcel tax to do any further work. And so that was agreed upon by the group as well, and the understanding of that. Not all members necessarily want to continue that work, but they realize, but they at least agree to the work must continue. There may be new membership and some different representation. Again, that's to be decided at a future date. And so, before I get to the recommendations, a thank you to all the members of the committee who served, some of them here tonight. Trustees who function as observers on that, thank you as well for your time. And my deepest appreciation for Dr. Topier for helping greatly to facilitate. She thought this was to be an LCAP sort of thing. So this is a lot more than LCAP as it evolved, but certainly being instrumental in that process. So much appreciated to all the representatives who have served on that and probably signed up more than they initially thought back in the fall. So recommendations from the LCAP group that are brought forth here tonight are as follows. I'm not going to get all the complexities, but just to keep it as simple, reductions in cost as presented to the LCAP group are as follows. $100,000 reduction in non-essential, non-critical travel. That's not the entire budget, but a significant amount of it. $42,000 reduction in food and beverage for school functions. Again, not the entire budget, but a significant amount of that for food and beverage. Roughly $350,000 in instructional coaches. That's for 1 full-time FTE release and 3 part-time 0.4 FTE releases that would return to a classroom environment. Roughly $1 million in the teacher leader model that incorporates a number of factors ranging from stipends to hourly costs to sub costs to supplies, and then of course to teachers then moving back into the classroom for the additional period that was given. Roughly $1 million you see there. And then a reduction in hiring of roughly 6.0 FTE that we had anticipated for growth to the tune of about $700,000. And then we share with the group this budget adjustment piece to count towards that. The group realizing that there are other things that the budget moves every day and that there are other factors that could move the budget in a different direction. But nonetheless, it helped the conversation move forward, I think, as Trustee Anderson says, was productive. I would agree. Doesn't mean it was easy, but it was productive to come up with a $2.8 million cost reduction plan. And we spent a lot of time clarifying that's not necessarily going to translate into savings. We will go back then, based upon action here tonight, and where the board goes, to work with Terry to figure out what that translates into savings. But they do realize it's not going to be that number, but at least it shows an effort and a plan as per the county, and they will then assess. They'll certainly look at it at budget adoption, and then likely at first interim based upon the outcome of the parcel tax. Dr. Toby, anything else you want to add? Does that cover most of it? And then I'll turn over the board if they want to get feedback from the observers who are there as well, and then answer questions.
Should we start with the 2 observers?
That just sounds so strange.
And then we
sounds
can
like we're lurking. Well, I mentioned this in my trustee report, but I don't know if everyone was here. So I'll just say it again to cover our bases, that this was the, now, it was at the third meeting, fourth meeting? This was, I thought everyone was very engaged in the process, and we know we're evaluating this process as we go, tweaking it. I think that we all feel that we got a little ahead of the process, and so we slowed it down and tried to let this LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group do the work that we foisted upon them, really. They didn't sign up for this big job, and I really felt that the people as an observer, the people in the group felt much more comfortable sharing whatever they were feeling, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it was productive, and I do think that the statement that everyone was asked to vote on was an accurate reflection of what we talked about that night, and I think it's a good place to start. 2.8 million. I do think it would be helpful for everyone to hear that staff did look into these ideas, the teacher leader program, the instructional coaching, for a long time. This was not just something that came up through stakeholder input. This has been an ongoing conversation for a long time, and maybe all the other board members would like to hear about that as well.
Usually I try and wait till the end, but what you said too, I think we can't forget that for the last, even when Doug Cranker was here, and I see people laughing at Noam. Cranky. He could be cranky sometimes. So anyway.
Positive intent. Take it.
Yeah,
yes.
sorry. I mean, there was a lot of work on this, and so what concerns me is now what we started to focus on was the fact that we had a format to put this work into, which was this resolution for the Marin County Office of Education. Because one thing I hear from people is, well, what would you have done if the Marin County, Trina Mars, hadn't come to your meeting? And I said, no, the superintendent had been working on this for the last couple years, and so has the staff, and there's been a lot of discussion. It's just that it formalized the format. And I want to be careful when we talk about it, that it's not that, well, another year would have gone by if Marin County hadn't come. That's definitely not the case. So I kind of wanted to expand on what you were commenting.
Yeah,
that it's
thank
been
you.
looked at. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of teacher, I'll defer to Dr. Topie if she wants to come up and share any background with regards to the instructional coaching and teacher leader. She's much more invested on the impact and, the conversation on that.
And if I can add to that question for you, if you're able to answer, you may not, because I know you're probably looking at it closely, how to backfill this effort. And I know that this is going to take some time, and you'll probably be coming back, but maybe comment on that, because.
So as far as the teacher leader model goes, there had been a subcommittee of negotiations with TFT and the district working on this model for at least a year. Ann Jaime and I were co-chairing that committee. And so that, and part of the process of that was to reduce the cost of that model. So that, we had been in negotiations, for lack of a better term, around that with a committee for about a year. And so we mutually agreed that at this point, just pressing pause would give us some space to revisit the committee work and all of that. So that's the work that was going into that. The coaching was originally funded through the Educator Effectiveness Grant. And our hope was that through, after the 2 years of the grant money, that we would be able to, supplement and find money within the budget to continue it. But given the budget crisis we're facing, because that money would have to come out of our general fund, we also felt that putting that on pause for now until we have a more solid basis would be, something that we could do. Neither one of those are easy decisions. Those are tools or facets through which we meet our LCAP goals. And we are working with our union as well as with our principals to, and the principals are working with their current TLs to identify ways that we can continue to get some of the work done. But, the truth is we won't get it all done. And that's a fact that we're going to have to face over the next year, at least, that we can't. There's 31 teacher leaders, and that work can't be replaced with just a few people. So we're going to have to prioritize what work will get done and what work will have to be on pause with the program.
Any other questions from the board or student trustees before we open it to public comment? Or we'll have time to comment more, but anyone want to make a comment now before public comment?
I do want to make a comment. It's a difficult decision that you made, and you made it very carefully with an awful lot of input, a lot of back and forth. I know that. I'm very grateful for it. It has an impact. We talk about proximity to students, which is, in some respects, kind of an absurdity. We have new staff. We have hired almost, 50%? Almost 50%
Depends on
new
where
staff?
you are. Yeah, over the last 5 years, it's at least, it's more than a third of the staff.
We've committed to, in our equity work, to support using Avid, for example. To expand that program, we've committed to programs like Capstone. The articulation to develop that bridge between the services we provide through Avid to connect them to the level that Capstone provides. What's going to happen to that kind of work? And I'm saying it really rhetorically because it's going to be out of people's free time. That's the way it happens.
Yeah. Yes, and I think how we organize some of our teacher collaboration time also. The work being embedded in some of that time, along with articulation within some of our and across our departments, some of the teacher team work that's going on during assigned collaboration time. There's an opportunity there to have, some of that work completed there.
Yeah. Thank you.
And just to be clear, the $709,000 in cost reductions, hiring 6 fewer people than we originally thought we would be hiring for 18-19. We are still hiring additional teachers.
We are still hiring additional teachers, yeah. Just fewer than we originally planned.
What is that number? Do you have any idea what that number might be?
It's not an easy, this is going to sound like I don't want to answer the question, but because of the reduction of teacher leadership built into some of that, it's hard to distinguish exactly what that number is. So, there was about 4.2 FTE in teacher leadership releases that goes back into the classroom, so that took some of that hit. Originally, the number that we had anticipated like 2 years ago, and we had budgeted for originally was 17.4 increased FTE this year, because this is our last, we have like a 6% increase in students this year. It's our last big increase, and because we had been staffing a little more closely, the plan was that this year would be the year that we would probably need to augment a lot. But because of TLs coming back in, that has offset some of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, also to talk about the reduction hiring, is there going to be some plans for changing for consolidating the classes that teachers teach and sort of is there going to be any getting rid of small classes with less students in them that don't meet certain requirements? Do you know how that's going to affect just the classes they offer?
Right now, even before this, the idea was that you were supposed to have 20 students to run a class, or 20 to 25. We try to make sure that any program that's going to run has at least 20 students in it for those purposes. So that would be the answer to there. So I have not heard of any specific, like there might be some electives that might not run, particularly, it's not a hard and fast rule because just of the way we always use French 1 as the example because we, for some reason, always have 42 students sign up for French 1, right? But so there will be small classes, or if there's 39 kids for French 1, there will be some classes that have smaller than 20. It's not like that's going to go away, but the rule is we're trying to get them all over 20 so that we can maximize the efficiency of our staffing.
Any other questions or comments before I open up to public comment? Okay, I'd like to now open it up for public comment on this item. Anyone that would like to make a comment, please come up and line up behind the podium.
Hello again, my name is Joe Price. I think that's probably enough for right now. Chair Harlander and other members of the board, thank you for your service. I believe that you all care deeply, but I also think that there has been and continues to be a profound lack of financial experience on the board and in the superintendent's office. First of all, I think that the division of the budget discussions tonight into two separate topics does not make sense. What you are responsible for is the bottom line cash. If you make a decision based on potential revenues and expenses, then you are voting for, without expenses, then you are voting for an incomplete budget. You would not commit to purchase a house of X dollars without knowing that your budget also includes enough income to support it. And tonight you're dividing the revenues with a vote on the parcel tax separate from a vote on cost reductions. For example, Board Member Futterman, I really appreciate your analytical approach, but I have a question. In this forum, it has to be rhetorical, but because I continue to find missing answers to these kinds of questions, I have a lack of confidence in this board. If, as you said, these cuts are insufficient in combination with the parcel tax passing, how can the proposed $3 to $7 million cuts over the next 2 years actually begin to replenish the reserve, which has been stated as the purpose of the cuts? Board Member Ford, our community might not vote like Shaker Heights or Grosse Pointe. Thank you, Prop 13. But if we had better outreach and communication from this board in the past, not now at the last minute, it might. The board and the superintendent made a very serious mistake by not addressing the operating deficit prior to January 2018. It has been in your financial forecasts for years. All these new kids didn't suddenly beam down from the Starship Enterprise. As I've previously written in a couple of letters, the purpose of board and senior management oversight is to avoid the kind of last-minute cuts that you now seem to be committing to as the only option. That is a major management failure. If I ran my companies like that, my boards would fire me for cause. Your inaction has left residents in the district with very little time to run an effective campaign for a parcel tax. The parcel tax, as discussed earlier, represents roughly $10 million of the $80 million annual budget. If the parcel tax doesn't pass, this district's finances, even after $7 million in cuts, will go down in the flames of an additional $10 million annual deficit on your watch. Because of that, your focus on cutting $7 million from the budget starting 8 weeks from now is penny-wise and pound-foolish. But it's even worse. You have decided that the time to cut the budget and to replenish the reserve is exactly when the district will be experiencing a large, but according to your projections, temporary bulge in the student population. Under normal financial management practices, extraordinary temporary expenses are used to justify spending from a reserve. You will say that the reserve can no longer afford that spending because it is already low. I know, but it is exactly your negligent financial management that has gotten us to this point. I disagree with the need to make cuts right now. In 7 months, the board will know if the parcel tax has passed. For the reason outlined above, I will believe it. I believe it will. I need about 20 more seconds. Families with children don't move to and live in Southern Marin because homes are a bargain. They buy here for the schools. I believe that you should lead the community not by cutting programs that you recently added to the budget, but by ensuring that everyone understands that only an appropriately sized parcel tax will provide for continuing quality education in this school district. That is the positive spin. Here's the negative spin, which I also think is necessary at the same time, and to which several of you have referred tonight. You should show the community without inducing panic or making it too obvious how badly the district's finances are being managed, what our schools' programs will look like when not $3 million, but $17 million or 20% is cut from the budget. You think you have a challenge now. Get your priorities straight for our kids' sake. Focus on improving communications and the parcel tax. Everything other than that is simply shuffling deck chairs.
Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer Tippett. I just have a quick question to which I know I can't get an answer in this moment, but with regard to the line items for reductions, the last one listed is a $560,000 budget adjustment. I just want to express my concern that it seems sort of nebulous. I don't know what that is, and that there could be programs in there specifically that I'm very concerned about being cut. So I'd love to know what that number represents. Thank you.
Hi, Tracy Van Hooser again. I just wanted to echo what was said earlier about a dismay that cuts are being made just as enrollment is increasing even further. And I guess after the previous board meeting where the house was packed, I'm disappointed to see that almost the full $3 million has been cut. I guess the feeling I had after that meeting was that there were a lot of voices saying, hey, wait, can't we see what happens with the parcel tax and not make the cuts right now? And then just to say one thing about the parcel tax, Trustee Anderson mentioned that the 149 increase we're asking for is pretty close to covering us. But then right after that, Trustee Futterman said the parcel tax and the cuts are still not enough. So I'm a little bit confused. Which is it? Are we going to be in good shape if this parcel tax passes, or are we still going to have more and more cuts? I'm just confused.
Any other public comment? We have a collision on our, there we go.
Hi, I'm Cindy Hall. I've sat and watched the board work for the last several years over these issues, and the one thing that I appreciate is that you've been thoughtful and methodical and sought a lot of input. I think what some people don't understand, that this isn't a speedboat. It's a large ship that has to be maneuvered slowly and carefully. And I think that you're moving in the right direction with the parcel tax, in the right direction with these types of cuts. And so I appreciate that. The one thing that I have to say about the reductions is that to me, and I think to many people, it shows that you really valued your people. Nobody is going to lose their job right now. And I want to say thank you for that. I hope that you do accept this recommendation. We know there's still a lot of work ahead to do, and there may be jobs in the future that we have to look at, but I appreciate that you put your staff as a priority and that there are no recommended layoffs in this proposal.
Thank you.
Good evening, Karen Lobica. I want to really echo Barbara's comments regarding the instructional coaches program, that actually really concerns me, and I've expressed it here and there to a number of people. I feel like that's one of the things that does touch our students pretty directly. If we can support our teachers, new and old, with new ideas, new ways of teaching, how to integrate all of the programs that are now available, it has such an impact on our students. And I really am concerned about that going away. I am aware of the teacher leader program, having been in conversation for a long time about, is it the right one? Is it too expensive? And so that sounds reasonable to me to put on hold. But I'm one of the persons that did not vote on the LCAP committee to approve this because of my concern around the instructional coaches. There was something else I was going to say, but now I forgot. Dan Oppenheim's comment about holding off on getting the reserves back up. That's what the reserves are there for, and I know we have been eating at them. But I think to represent or to echo a lot of the comments made is we've got to get through the next 2 to 3 years with this incredible enrollment bubble. And if it means taking that reserve from the current 10.3% or 10.8% down to 5% over a period of time, that might, I really encourage us to look at that as well. We've got to get through the enrollment growth. And if we can't do it by bringing in more money through a parcel tax, then we have to do it other ways. So, thank you.
I just, if I can add, I forgot to mention it earlier, I do want to, I know we have some administrators in the room here tonight, and while the recommendation is up there, one of the things that we did do, I think just as management, and I think the board was aware of this, certainly our administration is, in an earlier conversation, we chose not to add any additional assistant principals to our sites. Our schools are well aware, as we've added staff in some areas, particularly with teachers, the schools continue to grow, as Classified well knows as well. We haven't added any management positions in that growth. I know there's been some conversations, and I'm happy to share with anybody who wants to look. We took the time to go back 10 years in the district's history at all management positions that we've had in those 10 years. We have good people with memory in here of that, and we actually have 2 fewer administrative positions than we did 10 years ago when we were smaller by quite a bit. So I do thank our administrators for understanding this, particularly Redwood and Drake, who were slated to get additional administration due to their size relative to the number of assistant principals they have. So that's not listed anywhere because it was never budgeted. For all intents and purposes, there was a plan, again, as shared with the board, to bring that with the staffing plan, which is when we bring all staff forward, but realizing, like the teacher leader conversation, that the seriousness of this, we did hold off on adding any administrators during this period of time as well. And people will, it'll be harder. There's no way around that. So that's the only comment I want to add. And thanks our administrators for being here tonight as well.
While you're there, I have a question, and thank you. Karen made me think of it. Do you have any other feedback from the LCAP committee for reasons that others didn't vote for supporting the recommendation by you and your cabinet? Just curious, what were some of the dissenting views?
It was an anonymous vote.
Oh, I thought it was.
No,
I thought it
Karen
was.
just chose to state her vote.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought it was 80-something% of the people that supported it. Okay.
84% of those who voted, supported the recommendation.
I see. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for telling me. Okay.
So yes, we honestly can't, divulge that because we don't know that.
Can you explain the $560,000 budget adjustment again for everyone?
I will try. Terry's going to wince as I try to explain this, I know. As we reviewed, and this really came back to President Harlander's, the board's really direction some meetings ago to look at the 4,000 object codes. And so we did. We went back and looked at all the 4,000 object codes. And within the 4,000 object codes, there was a series of strings, not to get too sort of fiscal on you, there was a series of strings that had balances in them that were largely unspent. And so in taking a look at that, making sure that there was no allocation needed for that, or that was going to reduce some program or some staff, felt that it was appropriate to essentially zero that item out and reduce that essentially light item. The LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group chose to count that towards the $2.8 million amount that you see there. We did try, and hopefully it got through to the Fiscal Advisory Group, because it drives my fiscal person crazy, that while this is truly a benefit to the bottom line, there's just as many items that move in the other direction. And so when it comes time, when you see the budget in June and the estimated actuals, there's a whole lot of other transactions that happen all day long. There are things that happen as the board is picking up on, potentially changes in the PERS rates. That's going to move it one direction. There are some hirings that have happened with regards to some staff that have been added that moves it in one direction. So there's a net effect that's going to be different than this. But we agreed for simplicity and sort of for the benefit of the work that we were doing to acknowledge this piece. And so this piece in of itself, yes, is a positive to the budget. We do believe that line item won't be spent, and so we zeroed it out. And that's why the 560 is in there. There are items that move the other direction, and we got into that, but just to keep it simple, we said, okay, we understand.
So just to clarify, there are no programs or personnel in that.
Correct. There was nothing that, and we did some checking, there was nothing tied to that we were aware of.
Could I follow up and ask Terry, so that's a $560,000 that was both found, right, from various accounts that were added in order to reach this number. But what are the can you give us some examples of where our spending or our, is going to be greater than what's budgeted? And I mean, because I just have this sense that this 560 is an ephemeral figure.
Kind of a difficult question, but as was mentioned, the budget changes every day. So while we did find these budget lines that frankly had zero charge to them, whether they were placeholders or whatever, they were not even being accessed by those budget departments. And so, and we didn't find anything else that was a shortfall. So we knew that probably those didn't even need to be in there. And so that actually helps, because next year's budget is basically adds and subtractions from this year's budget. That actually does help us then by that amount of money in each of the next 2 years. Some of the things that I've seen go the other way, we went in and we dove a little deeper on special education and balancing out all of that funding, and that took a hit that went the other way, about $170,000. Staffing changes between now and the end of the year. We still have a few vacancies. Most of the certificated vacancies are not going to get filled, and so we've been pulling out that money out of the budget. Classified vacancies are typically filled, right? Those get filled throughout the year, but to the extent that they don't, or there's a bigger delay, that'll be a help to the budget, if not to getting the work done. But then there was another position that I saw an email that went out yesterday that said, are we increasing this position from 0.4 to 0.8? Let me know the final disposition. So, I mean, this is just happening every day. The 560 was kind of unique because it just kind of was like this neon light in the budget going, why is this here? No one's using it. No one's counting on it. There were no people. It was just a supply line. So that's why it kind of looked like a real obvious way to actually make the budget more reasonable and more right, while these others are just kind of the changes in operations that occur every day. Does that help?
Yeah, I mean, I do understand, right? It's a budget, so as the year progresses, we try to be as close as we can.
It's always ish.
Yeah.
No T's and I's in the budget.
Any other big items, either positive or negative, other than the special education?
No, I haven't seen anything else since second in a row.
Okay.
We lowered the assumptions on assessed valuation, but you know that?
Not since second in a row. Yeah. So right now, those are at 5% increase in property taxes this year, 4.75, 4.5 in the out years.
There's a conversation around pensions that.
Oh, Yeah, PERS rate went up 1/3% for next year, which I think is probably going to be about $35,000. So it's just, yeah, right. In each of the next 2 years and forever, who knows?
This 560 is one-time money, right?
No. I mean, it was in this year's budget, and it was not projected to come out of next year's budget, so it was assumed to be ongoing as if it were correct, or, as if it were needed. So it actually does help us each of the 3 years of the projection.
Good.
Yeah, it is good, for sure.
Actually, Terry, while you're there, I remember you shared this with me, and I don't think the other board members heard because you and I were talking on the phone.
Let's hope they didn't. We have other issues to discuss at that point.
It's getting to be that hour, isn't it? And we were discussing the dollar per student figure, because you've worked at schools throughout the state, right?
Yes.
I mean, you've done education financing for many years, and you were
30 plus,
reflecting on our dollars per student in relation to other affluent communities, and you were giving me a little bit of perspective, and I think you might want to share that with the rest of the board members. Or am I putting you on the spot because you don't remember the conversation?
Kind of, but we are an affluent community, and we are lucky to be, community funded or basic aid, or there are some districts in our state that are still better funded than we are. A few years ago, I worked at St. Helena for a summer, and that was pretty crazy. But we are still so much further ahead than a lot of the other districts, and so we do have that largesse. We do have that support. I've told some of the parents as I've walked out of other board meetings, I mean, it's so incredibly positive to be at these board meetings with the kind of community support that you do have. Some districts that have a lot of funding, it may be now that they're state funded, but they have a really high percent of high needs, English learners and very low socioeconomic, so they do get additional funding for that. But for just a vanilla, state-funded, average demographic kind of district, we're much better funded on a per-student basis, which is a beautiful thing. Is that what you
I
want?
don't have any further questions for you, but you might want to come back up if other board members or do any of the student trustees have any questions? And I'll then turn it back to my fellow board members. Any questions?
We did get the letter from the county office as relates to second interim, and they're again, we talk a lot with Tarina in the conversations, and it basically outlines what, from my understanding, and Terry can chime in, but again, the next major sort of resolution, so to speak, will come at first interim, pending our budget presentation in June. The budget, again, now moves us into the next fiscal year, so that's what they'll be looking at. And so the next time, really, the board or the county will then become sort of engaged to the level they are now, is in that December first interim report. And as mentioned, the intent is for the LCAP fiscal advisories to continue that work throughout the period up through November. Most likely summer will be a quiet time. We respect that. There are staff who are on that. But to the extent that we can do some work, at least in terms of process before the break, and then in earnest when we get back in the fall between that and the November timeframe. So by no means is the work finished, but that's the plan as communicated to LCAP Fiscal Advisory and the understanding, I think, from the people who were there. That's my recollection.
One thing I want to remind the board members, I actually watched the video again from the January 31st workshop, and one thing that we were very clear about was that this was going to be iterative, if necessary, that we were very explicit that this was a target that we looked to you to come back to us if something was too difficult or was going to cause too much of a strain on the district. You pointed out to us that you need to make a correction carefully, and it was the start. And so, based on even what we're talking about tonight, I'm assuming, and I assume the fellow board members are as well, that if you and Cabinet find it very difficult to provide the type of oversight that you get with the instructional coaches and teacher leader, you'll come back and have a counter proposal of some way to deal with that this isn't something that, we want to hear you, come back and talk to us if you're finding this is impacting any of these decisions tonight,
No more
anything you've
food.
recommended. Yeah. I think we were very clear at the beginning, this is going to be somewhat iterative, so I don't know if my other board members want to.
I also wanted to add that this came up in the LCAP Fiscal Advisory Group, and I think it would be helpful for the other board members to hear that throughout the stakeholder outreach process, where you had Tier 1, 2, 3, there were several great suggestions that you said staff is just going to do, like to turn off the lights more regularly or not water the lawn so much. I can't remember what all the examples were, but there are some things that just weren't discussed in the group because, these were ideas that we were just going to implement
Residency
immediately.
verification we are doing as well. That's not, again, we didn't count that as a savings explicitly, but it is something I can tell you we are doing. Dr. Topier's office is working on that, and hopefully we'll have information to share at some future board meeting on that. So yes, there's some things we're just doing.
Yeah, some residency verification and other efficiencies that we can implement immediately were not something that the group discussed because staff now has all that information and is working on it.
Yes.
I want to add, you used the word efficiency, and I think at the coalition meeting, they didn't get a chance to hear the fact that we, as a district, are participating with your participation as well, with county members and other trustees to begin to examine and consider efficiencies in sharing, and that's been going on for a couple of years now as well. And we don't necessarily see it here, but it is working, and it is getting closer to us in terms of, I think, numbers and money is involved. So that is going on.
So this is an action item. At some point, I would ask the board to approve this. There are people in the audience, I'm sure, here tonight who probably are here for this item as well.
Is that a nudge?
You're the board.
Would anybody like to entertain a motion to, and I'm looking at what number this is.
16C.
Thank you. I have my wrong glasses on here. Hold on. Can I have a motion to approve the LCAP Fiscal Advisory Committee recommendation? This is item 16C on the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor?
I'd like to have some discussion, if you mind. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. So I was so my bottom line here is I think this is insufficient. I am disturbed about the instructional coaches. I was an observer, like Laura was, to the LCAP Fiscal Advisory Committee. I thought that the members of the committee did a really responsible job, really worked hard to try to understand what are very difficult issues with really, I think, kind of a lack of background. And I think, frankly, the decision, I actually think that the way this is labeled on here is approve the Fiscal Advisory Committee, LCAP Fiscal Advisory Committee recommendation, I think is misleading. I think really the sense that I got from that meeting was that the consensus was that it was that the committee didn't feel like they had enough, they were in a position, committee members didn't feel like they were in a position of sufficient knowledge and effectively deferred to staff. That was the word that was used, deferred to the staff recommendation. And I think that's what we're getting here. We're getting a staff recommendation, not an LCAP Fiscal Advisory Committee recommendation. I'm not saying that's wrong, because I think that was actually probably a responsible and prudent thing for the committee members to do under all the circumstances. But we should be really clear that that's what we're voting on. This is a staff recommendation. Now, the staff spent a lot of time, right, prior to that, vetting these kinds of issues ahead of time, which frankly makes sense, right? I mean, who's going to know best about kind of where the bodies are buried, right? And what the meaning, how close it is to the students and what the impact is. Nobody's going to know better than the staff. People are here every day. So that makes sense as well. But the LCAP committee was provided with two, at the last meeting, was provided with two sheets, two lists of potential reductions in spending. Not savings, right? Dr. Yoshihara made that really clear, that we're not voting on savings, right? We're voting on reductions in budgeted spendings that we had in our budget. And there was a long list which included many of the things that we've talked about, before, and some of which have raised the ire of the community and input from the community. But there was virtually no discussion about any of the other line items at the committee. So, I mean, just there were numbers that were associated with it, right? But there was no discussion at the committee level about what would be the impact of eliminating the position of clerk 4, HR 2 for $103,000. Okay, there was no discussion about what would be the impact about cutting a grounds person? What would be the impact about cutting weekend custodians? I mean, it goes on and on and on, right? There were no discussion about, even though it was listed, about release periods for global education release, leadership release, and I found it really frustrating. Now, we only had so much time, and it was an imperfect process, and I fully understand that, but I think we're going to be faced with, it's not just the question of, are we going to have the additional revenue from the parcel tax, and what impact is that going to have on the budget? I'm an optimist. I feel we have a lot of support from the community. I really feel like we're going to be able to pass the parcel tax. But we're in negotiations with staff right now with respect to compensation levels, right? Salary levels for teachers and the classified staff. None of that's in the budget. None of it's in the budget. And the likelihood is going to be that those are going to be increased expenses. There just are going to be increased expenses. And we have a lot of staff, right? And the numbers, depending upon what the resolution is, it's going to be at least $500,000. It just is. We got a lot of staff members, and none of that's in the budget. And so I think we're dealing with a crisis here. Crisis provides opportunity. We have to make some hard decisions, and I think that, I don't think that, unfortunately, the LCAP committee process worked in such a way that everybody had a sufficient amount of time and a sufficient information, even though I think everybody was willing to really grapple with some of the hard decisions. And so my observation as an observer is that I'm disappointed with the process thus far. Now, I know that we will have additional opportunities going forward to discuss these things and to make some of these decisions. But I think we could do more. I think we should do more now. And I'm not convinced that some of these particular codes, such as the instructional coaches, for example, is a better decision for the money than some of the other opportunities, than some of the other sort of menu items that were provided. And unfortunately, we just didn't have that real sort of discussion. So I think this is highly imperfect. I appreciate all the goodwill and all the work that went into it. I think it's better than where we were before we had the process. I think we could do better.
If we named it, approve the deficit reduction plan for budget year 2018-19, I'm wondering, I mean, that's a start. And then under the text, we can explain this was staff recommendations with LCAP FA concurrence.
Well,
I mean, if this is, I mean, actually, if this gets memorialized this way, and I think you raise a good point, I mean, what is the difference? Why not? Maybe we should really, can we even do that with an agenda item? I guess that's more of a procedural question. Rename the motion.
I'm sure we can rename the motion. It's an agenda item, but I think that gets to a small part of what I'm trying to say. But I do think it more accurately reflects the process. But we have members of the committee here. If we want to, people are free to disagree with me. I wasn't the only person in the room. You were in the room.
I was in the room, and I'm just rereading the text that's up there, the background, and a lot of your concerns are embedded in there. You had more colorful language, but the process is imperfect. We didn't have enough time to go through all the line items, and I feel that frustration too. But I think, given the time constraint that we're under, what that recommended statement is a starting point. And, the concerns about any of those items, the instructional coaches or, teacher leader program, we might need to tweak the budget next year if we find that we really want to bring something back. And
Right, that's what we were saying before.
yeah. But I think that this is what the LCAP Fiscal Advisory Committee came up with, and I do think we should probably amend the motion to reflect some of the concerns that Michael expressed. What did you say it was?
I just approve the staff reduction, the deficit reduction plan for budget year 2018-19, and then we can have more of an explanation in the minutes. So I know that what you described earlier, and a lot of this has to do with the ripple effect of making these adjustments sometimes don't come out as an actual savings. The number ends up being different. Does this change you recommended $3 million this year and $4 million the following year, and that was just to be prudent, assuming we did not get a parcel tax. Does what you've learned over the last few months, looking closer at the budget, knowing we have increased pension costs, do you think this should be higher?
My initial caveat is I won't know until as we get closer to
numbers,
June.
Right.
The amounts that will need to be reduced are large. And there are some unknowns that are still out there, some that are positive and some that work the other direction. At this point in time, I think the additional $4 million in reduction in the next year, outside the parcel tax again, because that gets tricky. I think the LCAP Fiscal Advisory, what I share with them, we still have to do the work as if that's not going to pass. And what I share with them is that if we assume it passes and it doesn't, now all of a sudden we got a tremendous amount of work in even a shorter amount of time. So I think the $3 and $4 million, at least at this point, is within the ballpark of the targets, irrespective of the parcel tax happening. Again, we don't have compensation in there, and so that's hard to know.
But this April 17th date, wasn't that somewhat self-imposed, getting back to Michael and Laura's comment that,
yeah, it was.
I'm just kind of building upon that could this be a preliminary, and we are going to have to revisit it come June and at that point, you might recommend to us to do more, depending on what the budget shows in June.
Yeah, we're limited by some statutory, right? That part of the reason for this date is as the audience well knows, the May 15th.
Oh, the May 15th,
Yeah.
right. I'm sorry, May 14th.
Yes,
Okay.
while
now I
we can, we're
understand. That's
limited.
right. I'd forgotten that.
That's okay. That's,
Yeah, thank you.
So yes.
So I think normally, wait, 1 moment, I'm sorry, 1 moment. Typically, we have public comment, I'm going to let you talk. Typically, we have public comment one time, and then we deliberate. And I want to get a nod from my fellow board members if considering the topic and the concern if I allow public comment a second time. Is that everyone good with that? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear.
So, Tim Mothery, CSEA President. To your point, Michael, I think the LCAP, the big thing is we don't have enough information yet. And the important thing that I want everybody to recognize about this current recommendation is that these cuts are one-year cuts rather than permanent cuts to positions and other people, to give us the time to do the research, to figure out what we really need to hold on to and what is expendable. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Karen, did you want to make another comment?
I want to, first of all, thank you very much, Michael, for what you said, because I think so many of us, I reflect on looking around the room and they're like, literally hands up in the air, sure, we'll go with that because the staff said so. And we have two fine union representatives as part of the LCAP committee, and their job is to represent the staff, and they do a fine job, and their goal is obviously to protect the people. And I completely respect that, but to Michael's point, we weren't able to look at some of the opportunities, the other line items, to see where we might find more possible cost savings. And maybe my passion obviously is around these instructional coaches in this particular scenario, but I'm just kind of I'm confirming what Michael was expressing, that the majority of the committee was sort of, it's 5 to 8, we're tired. And if this is what we're going to recommend, then, or if this is what the staff recommends, we'll go ahead with it. So that's it. Thank you.
Just one last comment. I guess there are a lot of comments about not having enough information. I think one thing we do understand is that we have great teachers here. That's why people live in the district. That's why people want to send their kids here to school. Another thing we know, a 1% increase in compensation, $600,000. You go with something closer to CPI, call it 3%, that's $1.8 million. That's what you're not even accounting for right now. Yes?
Roughly.
So.
No, we realize that.
Right, but so you're going through these budgets without including that. There's a need to make more cuts. You might want to think about that in terms of just what's truly needed in revenue, because if you want to be true to everyone here, you have to cut much more than what you're talking about now.
Anyone else? Any other public comment? Okay, Corey, and then we're going to.
Corey DeMars, president of the TAM Federation of Teachers. I want to address several points. One is Karen's point around losing the instructional coaches. And Michael's point about we didn't have a chance to talk about the loss of a groundskeeper or mechanic or whatever examples you gave, people. We did realize that we did not have a lot of time to talk about these things. So we did have a conversation about looking at it from a philosophical standpoint and what we value. And I thought we walked away with consensus from the group that what we valued was to save people's jobs. The instructional coaches, we didn't have instructional coaches 2 years ago. It's been a great addition to our program. It was a 2-year program. It worked well enough to where there's a big push to continue it. But the fact is we didn't have it 2 years ago. But we did have BITSA and we did have the mentor program, which are still going on, and those are supports for new teachers. So it's not as if the instructional coaches go away and all hell breaks loose in these classrooms. We have 300 plus really damn good teachers in this district. And I'd like somebody to recognize the fact that, yes, it's great to have these additional supplemental programs to allow them a platform to collaborate and coordinate with each other in an even more structured sort of way. But absent of that doesn't mean that teaching goes down, the level and the quality of teaching in this district. Somebody has to recognize the fact that we have 300 plus professional, well-trained teachers and counselors in this district. That is indeed why we have such an exemplary program in our district and have had for years. None of us like to see this go away. It is a 1-year cut that we're talking about, but the idea that that going away and it's going to have such a almost fatal impact on teaching and kids, I just don't support that idea at all. There's enough other supports in place to allow us to continue to work at the level that we work at. But we did talk about the values associated with it, and we all agreed that we didn't have enough time because of how the process was rolled out and how late it started to discuss the impact of each and every line item, which is why we went to a more philosophical value sort of position on, can we at least make decisions based on what's most important to us? And it's frustrating that you left that part out of the entire conversation that you witnessed at LCAP. because it was the response to not having enough time to look at each and every line item. So I just want to put out there that the recommendations that have been made here were done very thoughtfully, and were certainly done with the notion in mind that it would have the least negative impact on students. And I still believe that, and I still support that. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to bring it back to the board now. I think any other comment? I would like to propose that we rename this motion and approve the deficit and reduction plan for 2018-19.
Yeah, so Chuck made the motion.
I just said I'd like to make it that motion.
So you're amending
I'm
the
asking somebody to make that motion and rename it that.
I
so-
move to approve the deficit reduction plan for 2018-19.
Actually, there's a motion on the table, so
Oh, I
you
have to-
suggested, just procedurally, I think you suggested an amendment
Change
to the
it,
motion. So
yeah.
the maker of the motion can accept your suggestion.
Okay.
Okay, so
and
that's
then
right.
the
You
second
made the
would do
motion.
the same
I
thing.
accept the suggestion.
You accept it? Thank you, Chuck. Okay.
I second the amended motion.
Great. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those nay? Okay, I wasn't sure if I heard everybody. Thank you. Students, can I have a preferential vote? Thank you, Barbara.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I didn't vote. You didn't hear me.
That's right, so I was right.
Well, you were right.
That's
You're
why I
moving
said
really
nay, and
fast.
I thought, yeah.
You're moving really fast, yeah.
Okay, would you like to vote nay or abstain?
Um,
Maybe I should say it this way. All those in favor, yea. All those against? Any abstentions? I'll let you just say what you'd like.
Yeah, no, I'm going to vote yes because I think it's important that we send a unanimous message that we're serious in terms of reducing spending. But I do so in frustration that I've already expressed.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. I think it's off to
Kenwood Energy, thank you.
they already.
Students, they just voted already.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did. Preferential. Yeah, they did already. I'm sorry, it's late. It's the last one.
Who's the guy at the press table?
Tim, don't
The guy
take
at the
this
press
personally.
table,
okay?
he's
That's what
leaving.
I said. I just told her it's the last one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can wait for Chuck.
Oh, no, well, maybe this will get him to come back.
Doesn't he have to go to the bathroom?
Lars, would you like to get started, please?
Do we want to wait for Mr. Ford, or would you like me to go?
Yeah,
We're going to get started again.
I think so.
I'm not going anywhere, I'm listening.
Okay. We're now on agenda item 16D. It's Lars Christensen will be presenting the review and discuss Kenwood Energy Management Report.
I had a lengthy, very eloquent preamble to the presentation of Mr. Holmes, but I'm going to jump right to it. A couple of months ago, the board approved commissioning an energy audit of our school district, given Prop 39 funds that we have encumbered towards making our various school sites more energy efficient. This is also in response to board recommendation or board request that as we reviewed the facilities master plan of well over a year ago, there were some items on the facilities master plan that we thought that we could attack and address via alternative sources of funding, Proposition 39 being one of those sources. So with that, without further ado, and my lengthy, eloquent preamble, I will introduce Mr. Tim Holmes of Kenwood Energy, who the board commissioned to conduct an energy audit of our school district. So without further ado, Mr. Holmes. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for your patience through the evening. And I'm sorry that the crowd left. I'm sure these three ladies are going to stay though and listen to you.
That's why they came. They came for this.
No pressure. Yeah, I think the first time I spoke in front of this board is about 5 years ago. It was 11:30 when I got on, so this is a piece of cake. Yeah, it's early. So Tim Holmes, Kenwood Energy, here to talk about Proposition 39 and also how it relates to potentially doing a comprehensive energy project is what I like to call it. So Proposition 39, real quickly, is a proposition that was voted into law about 5 years ago. What it did is it closed a tax loophole and redirected all the funds from that loophole to do energy management projects in school districts. And the Tamalpais Union High School District received, over the 5 years, about $861,000 in funding, of which about $570,000 of that is still remaining. So, oh, I have this. And where do I point it? Okay. And so Kenwood Energy was hired to do develop an energy management plan for the district. The focus of the plan was to make sure that you spend the funds that are available to you from Proposition 39. Those are free funds and there's no contingency. You don't have to spend more than $561,000. It's just money that's available to you still. So we want to make sure that that gets spent and we don't lose that. But while we were at it, we thought, let's put together a preliminary comprehensive plan and consider how that might work, and also to look at funding mechanisms, again, in a very preliminary format, to see if we can make a comprehensive energy management plan pay for itself from day one, meaning that the district doesn't have out-of-pocket costs, you reduce costs to your budget, and also potentially fix some maintenance issues and capital improvement projects, maybe do some capital improvement projects that you might not have had funds for. So that's what we were looking for. And again, this is a preliminary analysis. So what we did is we looked at lighting. There's a program managed by the county called the Marin Energy Management Program, and they provide free services to all the school districts and public agencies within the county. And they did a lighting audit of the 3 schools. It mostly focused on outside lighting and gymnasium lighting. And most of the Proposition 39 funds are targeted towards these lighting programs. So even if you just do the Proposition 39 part of this project, you'll get most of these lighting retrofits done. We also looked at cogeneration. Cogeneration is where you have an engine of some type. You use natural gas to run the engine, and that engine creates electricity. And it also, you capture the waste heat to heat water and use that water to heat your pools. So that way you save money on electricity and you save money on heating your pools. That's what the cogeneration part of it is. You already have infrastructure in place. At some point, the district wanted to do some cogeneration projects at all 3 schools. You put pads in, you pulled the electrical conduit, you got ready to connect piping, and for some reason that project never got built, but the infrastructure is still there. So we just updated the costs and the energy savings analysis based on what was already existing. We also looked at HVAC equipment. There is a small part of Proposition 39 funds that are targeted towards, HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, air conditioning. There's a small part of the funds that are targeted for 2 or 3 pieces of equipment that are failing or imminently failing and need to be replaced. But we looked at a total of 70 different pieces of equipment that are nearing the ends of their lives, meaning they're more than 15 years old, and they could potentially be a problem soon, or you need to replace them. And finally, we also looked at some more solar projects. We looked at doing parking structure solar at Drake and Tam, and then adding a little bit more solar to Redwood. And the only caveat on Redwood is you're in an older net energy metering program at Redwood, so you can only add 10% more to the existing system, or else you have to re-sign up, and that's probably not a good thing. So we don't really want to go there. So that was just for 10% more solar. And so here's where I start overwhelming with numbers. So the total cost of all those projects was a little over $5 million. There are PG&E rebates mostly for the lighting programs of $131,000. There's $587,000 for Proposition 39 funds. I think I said 570 earlier, and that was a mistake. It's 587. So the net cost of this project would be $4.4 million. We accounted for additional maintenance costs for the solar and for the cogeneration system because those are kind of technical to run and it's probably outside of staff's existing skill sets. So we added a lot of money in there to keep those things running. The savings from all those projects is about $447,000 per year. And the internal rate of return of that investment is 10.7%. And the net present value is $7.6 million. And what that means is over the life cycle cost of 25 years that we evaluated it, that's money, you've paid yourself back your initial investment, and that's money that you get to spend on something other than electricity over the 25-year period. Over to the right, you can see some bullet points. Lighting has a very quick payback, and lighting is often used to help fund other projects. The cogeneration systems appears to have a good payback, but again, it's a preliminary analysis. We put a lot of contingencies in there, tried to make the cost robust, but you don't know until you start really looking at some of the details. Solar has a reasonable return on investment. It's positive. It makes you guys some money. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning does not pay for itself. So what we're really doing is we're taking capital improvement projects and we're moving into a comprehensive energy program. So not only are you going to potentially reduce costs and save money, you're also replacing problematic equipment, which is a maintenance cost. And we didn't account for maintenance savings related to replacing old equipment. Let's see. Then we looked at funding mechanisms. So capital purchase, that's where you take money out of your funds and buy this, and after the previous discussions, that probably doesn't sound real feasible. You can use I was listening. A power purchase agreement, that's a unique thing related to energy projects. And what happens is a vendor will come in, they'll build a solar system, and they'll charge you for the energy. And essentially, they own that solar system, and you just pay for the energy. And you don't have to maintain it or do anything. It's theirs. And if you do it right, you're going to save some money. The big challenge is that you're entering into a 20 to 25-year contract with, and it's actually not the vendor, it's actually a bank. You're entering into a long-term contract with a bank. So you have to do some due diligence. If you do it right, everything works. If you do it wrong, you can be overcharged and there can be some other issues. And also just, you can get leases and standard loans, and potentially as a school you could get a bond. There's a lot of ways to do funding. A lease is what was used in the solar system that we have out here. There were some funds from Proposition 39, and then there were some funds from a bond, if I remember right, and then the rest of it was leased, or there was a lease for the rest of it, and it resulted in energy savings that were greater than your payments, so you have a positive cash flow for that system out there on a monthly and annual basis. And then, so here's what it looks like. The red line is if you only did Proposition 39. When I'm doing these life cycle cost analysis, I can't make them perfect. I wanted to keep the rebates separate from the Proposition 39 funds. So you see it starts out negative. That's because you probably have to use your own funds to actually build it, and then Proposition 39 gives you the money back. So it's not really your money, but it looks like it's negative at first. But you can see that some of the equipment only lasts 18 years, so it just stops. I think I stopped it at 15 years. But it would just kind of, if you invested some more, that line would drop, and then it would continue at that same direction. The yellow line is the capital purchase, so it has a big deficit to start with, but it has the greatest net present value. And then we can assume we have to make some pretty gross assumptions for a PPA and for leases. And so I did my best based on recent experience that I have seen for PPAs, and then I was rather conservative and added 20% to it, so I think it's realistic. These cash flows include maintenance costs, they include assumptions for inflation, for energy escalation, for all of these things down the right side. We have assumptions in these life cycle cost analysis. And these are the numbers behind that, but we won't dwell on those. But they're there, just for you to look at them. So there are challenges. At Drake, if I remember right, you have built a new building where the pool used to be, so all the infrastructure was in one place, targeted to do something that it has to kind of do something else now. And also it's down in a basement, and getting an engine down in a basement could be challenging. So TAM High School doesn't just have an electric account, they have a bunch of electric accounts. And it was not part of our study to locate all of those and to figure out, if we put a cogen system in, that it goes to this account. What we did do is see that there are two relatively large accounts, and we assumed we could attach one to the solar system and one to the cogen system, and that those balanced out really well. But we don't know that they're actually right next to where we would do the installation, so that could create problems. On the solar side, in Redwood, you have some racking on the roof that was targeted for solar. It was put up there to put solar on it, but we didn't evaluate whether it's still feasible to put the solar up there. Also, we haven't done geotechnical studies at TAM or Drake, which I don't know if all of you were here, but we were digging 40-foot deep holes out here, and that was rather expensive and could make, if it's similar, it could be unfeasible to do solar. A PPA is good for solar and it's good for cogen, but it doesn't really fit lighting and HVAC. So if you went the PPA route, we'd have to figure out a different funding mechanism for lighting and HVAC projects. And then we also need to go through some kind of competitive process. Technically, you don't have to do a low bid process because there's a government code out there that says that as long as an energy project pays for itself, it doesn't have to be a low bid. You can select vendors based on the best value and the best fit for the things you're trying to accomplish within the district. Overall, if you take all of those projects that we looked at, you're offsetting 100% of the energy use at Drake. You're offsetting 99% of the energy use here between that extra solar and the cogen and the energy efficiency. And at TAM, you're offsetting 63% of the energy use. And so the recommendation from staff is that the board directs the staff to continue down this path of a comprehensive energy project. The next steps would be to go through either an RFP or an RFQ process, evaluate proposals, select a vendor, and then come back to the board to present the results of that process. And should all of that look good and the board decide to direct staff to pursue a contract with that vendor, have that vendor update the energy study, because again, this was relatively preliminary. And then after that study is updated, to come back to the board and say, with final costs, final energy savings, and ask the board whether the board wants to actually proceed with the implementation and construction of the energy project. And then one of the reasons, if you go back kind of highlighting where it says update the project, the reason is because there's a lot of stuff we didn't look at in this phase, because we're really looking about feasibility and gauging what direction the board wants to go and the district wants to go. There are options for energy efficiency with theater lighting. Some of the boilers that you guys have could be more efficient, but on the other hand, the more efficient ones you have tend to be more maintenance. So you might want to or not want to go down that path. You could do classroom lighting. When these audits were done, it was 2 years ago, and some of the LED lighting that is being developed now could replace this type of lighting, where a couple of years ago we really weren't. Do additional HVAC, do controls. There's battery storage to consider. That's the buzzword everybody hears about. And then there's marine clean energy, which deserves a good 30 seconds. Is you can sign up for Marin Clean Energy, which you are not a customer of theirs. Their energy is cleaner than PG&E's, and it's nominally less expensive than PG&E's. So it's kind of a no-brainer. It doesn't cost you anything. In fact, it saves you a tiny bit of money, and it's cleaner energy. It's less greenhouse gas emissions with Marin Clean Energy. And that's me, and there's my contact information if you guys should have any questions.
I'm just going to let whoever wants to go first, go first.
I have a question for you, Tim. Welcome back. And
Thank you.
sorry, we're another late night. Couple questions. So tonight, staff is looking for board to direct them to implement the comprehensive option, which is all 4 of the things that you mentioned, versus just using the money, the Prop 39 funds of $590,000 or whatever it is. Those only would pay for the lighting and the HVAC, right?
Correct.
So tonight, are we being asked to decide whether or not just to go for the things that we have the money for, the lighting and the HVAC, or to do direct staff to do the comprehensive, all 4 things, which would require an RFP?
Perhaps a caveat on that would be to pursue a comprehensive project that pays for itself, as opposed to one that costs the district money. In other words, to put the more comprehensive program together with the funding to make sure that it does not negatively impact the budget.
I see, okay. And I have a question about the TAM solar panels. On the diagram, it looks like it was parking lot similar to what we have at Redwood. And I know that this would.
It's on a marsh.
Yeah, it's on a marsh. So if you thought pilings here were a problem, I think that pilings there would be a really huge problem.
It'll be just like this place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you look at this, I'm sorry, go ahead. Did you look at the studies when there was were you involved? There was an evaluation of potentially putting photovoltaic cells at Drake and at TAM, which took into account a variety of factors, as I recall, right, weather, stability of the ground, how much work would have to be required in the parking lots as a result. There was a lot of work that was done when Redwood was selected, and it was, last meeting we had, I think it was last meeting, we had a number of Drake students here
Yeah,
who
it
were
was last meeting.
talking about Marin Energy and all. They just, right?
Yes.
You threatened us, I think, right? Didn't I hear you earlier, Chuck? You threatened us that if we didn't put in.
You'd be here with pitchforks.
Be here with me. But there was.
Tell you, they were passionate.
Yeah, but some of this ground has been plowed already, and I don't know whether you have that access to some of that information.
I did not see a comprehensive study of solar. I know that shortly after the system was installed here, I did a very preliminary analysis similar to what I did here. And I have received phone calls from students and things, but if anything has happened in between that time, I'm not aware of it.
No, I thought, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that there was, before we approved the Redwood, right, there was an evaluation of whether it should be at Redwood or, the location. And there were distinct advantages to Redwood and/or disadvantages with the other two locations.
No, it was very intentional that it's at Redwood.
And Sally was involved in that process, and so I would like to think that there's some documentation of that somewhere.
The east parking lot here was dodgy because of the, drilling down. After the experience in the west parking lot, this is far less ideal. And I can't remember why there was a recommendation not to put anything in the Drake parking lot, but it seemed it seemed a reasonable recommendation. And TAM, your front parking lot, you're in a flood zone and, all this stuff going on. Why, do you know why they can't do a roof installation at Drake?
Yeah.
It's not that you can't, it's that it is much more challenging. The Division of the State Architect has different requirements for roof-installed solar than they do for parking structure solar systems. It can take a lot longer to get through, and it can be a much greater challenge, but people do it. Dixie, who was being discussed earlier, has roof-mounted solar systems.
Is it possible, Tim, the Marin Clean Energy, we heard from the Drake crew last week, our last meeting about MCE, and I'm wondering if it's such a no-brainer, if we could just do that. Like, do we have to have an RFP to decide to go with Marin Clean Energy instead of PG&E?
No, I would not think you'd need an RFP to go with Marin Clean Energy. I think it would, well, now I'm trying to think how the board would work. I think if you guys decided, it's a phone call, is all it is. And you have a choice. The only choice you have for energy is Marin Clean Energy or PG&E. So really, you're just talking about who provides the energy part of it. PG&E will always provide the transmission and distribution part of that cost. But Marin Clean Energy buys the generation, and that's the part that's either solar or natural gas or coal-fired.
So the question that I asked last week when this came up, and I don't think, or last meeting, and I didn't understand the response, which is probably my fault, which is, I mean, didn't we enter into kind of purchase agreements in installing the solar panels at Redwood? I mean, does that contractually obligate us, for example, to continue to deal with PG&E based on that? I mean, there were a lot of assumptions about the kind of rebates that we were getting and so forth. I mean, are we really free to?
Yeah, yes, you are. The net energy metering program is through PG&E, and it's through the transmission and distribution part of it. And again, Marin Clean Energy what they would do is whatever energy you did provide would be coming from them instead of from PG&E. And they would be using PG&E's transmission and distribution lines to get that energy from wherever it is to you.
So, can I ask another question? I'm sorry that you've come up. This is frankly complicated stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at these.
And I'm sorry that it's come up,
And it's 9:20, so
well, it's just tonight
our
after
brains are moving slower.
Yeah,
right
after
now.
we've had some pretty significant, issues that we've been discussing. I guess,
Maybe I can help this for a moment. The board
yeah.
doesn't have to make a decision tonight.
You're looking for direction.
Yeah, this is a presentation just to present the energy study, the energy assessment, show you some options. We can certainly bring this item back on multiple occasions for the board to have discussion. But I thought it was important that Mr. Holmes has done, he's been fabulous to work with, by the way.
Tim is great. We've had,
I like Tim.
This was to show you that work's been done, and now we do need to start thinking about how we want to spend those Prop 39 funds, if nothing else, because there's a 2020 deadline on those. But we're not looking for you tonight to make monumental decisions as to going forward with one project or another.
Okay.
This was an informational item.
Can you go back to the slide of the funding options, the multicolored graph? Right. So just speaking for this board member, I think it's pretty clear that we're not going to make a capital purchase where we're going to spend $5 million of existing funding. That would probably not be a
You're not going out on a limb there.
Yeah, that would be probably not a prudent thing to do under existing, right? So we can eliminate, I think we can eliminate that right from the start. Is that fair? Is that?
I assumed such.
Okay.
For the same reason we didn't purchase the ones in Redwood.
Yeah. Exactly. So one concern I would have with respect to, and I'm not sure where it is with respect to bonding capacity,
Oh, God, yeah.
is that it is, as Laura mentioned earlier, at some point, we're gonna, I mean, I think my recollection is that we have quite a bit of bonding capacity left.
300 million.
300 million. So.
Oh, yeah, that was something we got out of that.
So what is this, if we were to, what percentage of, how much bonding capacity would we have to use if that's the way we were going to finance this?
Well, it matters what you would finally approve. This again, is a fairly preliminary study that just focused on 4 things and came up with about $5 million, or 4.4 net cost. So that's $4.4 million in bonding that you would have. Okay. And I think I used 4 or 5% interest on this, which I assume bonding would be much lower interest than that.
And is that something that requires approval of the voters?
That I don't know.
In terms of if you're going to go out for a bond, yeah, if you're going to tax a home, yeah, you'd have to get voter approval. Okay, I think I know where you're going. If you're going to where does our existing bond allow us to issue a series under the language of the last bond, then that may be a different question. I think you know where I'm going with that too. So I'd have to actually look at the ballot language to see if that's where you're going, if it's a relatively small amount. But if, and I don't know yet, for all intents and purposes, when I got here, I think we were, for the most part, closing out the bond and not issuing any new series. You know, so, but otherwise, yeah, you would have to go out to the voter.
But are we expecting, would we be expecting would the voters be on the hook for these? Or would these be bonds that would be effectively financed with, you know, energy production or energy, I mean, I don't.
I think what you're maybe asking is something like a COPS. I thought we did a COPS on the solar.
We did a power purchase agreement.
No, I don't think we did a PPA. I think we did a certificate of participation, which is essentially a borrowing mechanism.
Yes.
Because I remember Sally talking about us defeasing the COPS. Again, sorry for the finance. So yes, we could do a loan of some sort to pay off for smaller amounts, and these are usually within the range of a certificate of participation, which is essentially a loan mechanism. And districts can do COPS for those things.
No, you go ahead. I was going to ask a question, but.
Well, the question would be, to just try to put a finer point on this, is what would be the income stream to, you know, to pay off the bonds? Is it, right, if we have to go, if we're asking for the public to pay it, right, that presumably that means in the absence of available bonding capacity, we would have to go to the public. If the bondholders are looking to the project to fund the repayments, then we wouldn't have to go to the voters, right? I mean, just as a general principle. And so which one are we, what would we be talking about here?
We didn't go to the voters for the solar stuff, so I'm thinking that this is a similar proposition.
Yeah, I don't know if PG&E still offers the program whereby the savings can be used to sort of pay back. There was a term for it, but it's...
They have on-bill financing.
On-bill financing, yeah. So you can do
But that's
OBS
only
stuff.
for the energy efficiency stuff. They don't on-bill finance for the cogen or the solar systems.
Okay, all right.
And it has to pay for itself in a certain amount of time, which the HVAC equipment does not.
Okay.
So is there any cost to you, if we were to give you direction to further explore this, I mean, what's the cost to the district?
Yeah.
Right, before we say ultimately yes and what, and depending, right? Before we make a decision with respect to go forward and the scope of what that decision would be.
Well, there would be some costs for the consulting, and instead of trying to answer that now, I'd be happy to put something together so that you can consider it, you know, a real proposal as opposed to just guessing.
I have some, unfortunately, I had read the report, not the slides, and it was a while ago, but I think my general question, when I look at actually this slide here and then the follow-on slide.
That one?
Yeah, both of these. I'm having a hard time getting my arms wrapped around what are the uncertainties associated with these. I mean, what is the, so the Prop 39 funding shows, the year zero, negative 626, 316. Does that mean that that's funding, that's what it's costing, but are we using the funding from Prop 39?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we're not seeing that in our budget, but that's really what the system would cost. And then we'd get a return right away, starting year one on down.
Correct.
And what is the certainty around those return numbers? I think that was one question I had. You said on the slide before that you were pretty conservative what you assumed in terms of cost of living. I mean, we hear there's going to be a big downturn in the market. I mean, if something were to happen along those lines, how would it, on a percentage basis, do you have an idea if we would be, I don't know if you know where I'm going with this.
There's, what do they call it? There's an analysis named after a casino somewhere where you consider all those options. And
Monte Carlo. Statistics,
yeah. Yeah, the Monte Carlo analysis, which gives you a range of.
You didn't know the Monte Carlo?
I thought it was a Chevy.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out what risk are when we make this decision. I don't have a feel for how much I'm gambling, really. So okay. So that's my problem with this. It's not my area of.
We could do analysis on that to. In a way that it can address your concern. It takes some time and effort. If you're asking me how I feel about it, I think that this is probably costs and savings are plus or minus 20% in either direction.
Okay, that's helpful. That's all I needed. No, that with your experience, and that's okay. And the PPA hybrid. That's when you have an outside, I'm trying to remember what that is. That's what
the power purchase agreement is somebody else owns.
Somebody else owns it.
They own the solar, they own the cogen, but you're actually getting a lease or some kind of financing for the lighting and the HVAC equipment. And then all of that is put together in that cash flow. And these are, by the way, net present value numbers in this table.
And it's for 25 years?
Yeah.
Wait, 25 years? And is there a reason why you chose 25 years other than
That's the life of the solar system.
That's what I was wondering.
And then the cogeneration, if you pay a maintenance fee based on how much it operates, and essentially, if you're doing that, when it reaches a certain point, they'll just replace the motor, and it's kind of just goes on and on and on. The HVAC was a little bit trickier. That's the one where I think I reinvested in one of these cash flows in year 18 or 13 or something. I forget what I did because I didn't read that report recently. But I did something where I reinvested some of the money so I could extend that to the.
Well, I think that was one of my questions, that different components had a different life expectancy, but you combined each component and assumed a net present value of 25 years, and that I'd rather go with a less year, like go do a net present value for 10 years if we're going to really combine them all.
Well, and you can actually do this from this table here, because these are net present values.
Each year?
Yeah, so what I did, it's coming back to me, is I reinvested for the lighting, because lighting has a 12-year, and so I put in a 12th year, reinvesting the exact same amount and getting the savings back. With the HVAC equipment, it has a life of 18 years, but the reality is the stuff on your roof is often 25, 30, 35 years old.
Okay.
So, again, being a preliminary analysis, I didn't overkill with just the HVAC. I kind of cheated on that one. But, so you can pick a year in here and say at 20 years.
I got it. Thank you. Oh, that's helpful. Thanks. That was very helpful. How do you guys want to proceed?
I just have one other question.
Okay.
Sorry. I thought you mentioned in the course of your presentation that with respect to some of this, if we build some of this infrastructure, there's a question about whether there's some additional costs associated with it because we don't have the in-house expertise or enough sort of resources to monitor or to maintain or.
Well, like the solar system that you have out front here, you have a maintenance contract. They come in and clean it twice a year, and if something goes wrong, you can call them. They come and do annual maintenance and look at the connections and make sure that it's operating properly and hopefully catch any problems before they become a significant problem.
Water intrusion?
Yes, and hopefully they're watching that. And cogeneration, the easiest way to talk, most cogeneration systems now are called microturbines, but the most basic one is actually a Chevy motor that they stick in a box, and they send somebody out who changes the oil. They do all the maintenance that you do on an engine, and after it's been driven 100,000 miles, they bring a rebuilt motor and they put it into the box, and it just goes on and on and on like that. And you're paying for that for every single hour that that thing operates. You're paying them a fee, and that was that $50,000 that I had in there of the additional maintenance. That's what that was to pay all those fees of operations and maintenance. And yeah, that's probably, none of this stuff is, it's not too technical, but, and you probably have people who could do oil changes and rebuild motors, but that's probably not what is in their job descriptions at this time.
But those costs are baked into this?
Yes. Yeah, if we go back a couple of slides, yeah, you look down at the fifth row, added maintenance, $54,000. So that's what we've assumed every single year, and then we have inflated that.
And are we going to be able to, would we be able to handle this without adding staff? Yes?
We have an in-house mechanic.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. He could do it. Definitely could do it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
So I am very tired, and I feel like I need to read this some more and maybe follow up with some questions, but I'm very intrigued. I definitely can't make a decision with my brain right now, but I do like that first column just because I don't have to deal with the idea of financing. But I know that's not the best reason to make the decision. I'm just tired and don't like I just see financing. Ugh. So I don't feel capable of making any strong recommendation other than
We can
I'd like
just
to spend
give-
some time looking at it and actually reading more thoroughly the report and sending you some questions. This is really good stuff, and I know we really want to use these funds. Don't they expire in
Yeah.
a year or something?
Yeah, if we go
Oh, wait,
back.
2 years, that
let's see,
magic year,
so-
2020.
There it was. June 30, 2020, they have to be spent by.
Okay.
To spend it by then?
Yeah.
Really, what's our operative deadline in terms of making a decision?
Probably, if you were just doing Proposition 39, you would need to have a decision a year before that to get all of that stuff built.
And if we were folding it into a more extensive project, what's our timeline?
Well, it's going to probably take longer than that. But you can probably incur the Proposition 39 funds quicker and still meet all the requirements of the program. I mean, obviously, that's one of the key things here is to track that, make sure that we're on time for that. So, yeah, there is some essence of time.
So what do you need to hear from us in order to help us make a decision when we are a little more coherent?
Did you say what or when?
What direction do you need from us to be able to come back and help us make a decision? Right?
My suggestion would be that you direct me to speak with Mr. Holmes with regard to the development of a proposal for a more comprehensive project. To do further analysis, essentially, we need to get a proposal to see what that.
So do we need to give you then, like, performance, like metrics, like kind of what you were alluding to earlier? Clearly, we don't want to spend any money from our budget or minimal amount. And, I mean, because if you give us, that's going to take you time to put a proposal together. We should probably give some more.
Well, I think just a consultant's proposal of sorts.
Yeah, it's just
just a real basic, an hourly
it's a
kind of a thing?
Page or page and a half is what it
Okay,
is. And
okay, so it's just an hourly rate to be able to answer more of these questions.
Tim will continue to meet, and we'll talk about some potential next steps for the board to consider.
Is there any deadline in terms of our June budget proposal? Would that have to be factored into that
No, the Prop
budget?
39 funds are encumbered. I mean, Tim's absolutely right. We want to make sure that we're tracking on the timeline on those, so we don't give those back, lose the opportunity to use them, spend them. The bulk of that money is going to be spent on lighting, as Tim showed you in the presentation. But we want to track on those, make sure we don't lose sight of the deadline. But there seems to be some opportunity here, if we're creative, to really address some needs in our school district with regard to our facilities.
Right, no, it sounds so good.
So I would respectfully recommend that we continue to work with Tim, that we solicit a proposal from his firm to serve as a consultant and continue to look
To help us
at a larger
navigate this
scope
whole
of
thing.
project.
right. And his costs come out of that same fund? The consulting costs, they come out of the Prop 39 fund in our budget, or is it a different budget?
I believe there are still.
Yeah, there
funds
should
for
be,
this.
we've got that money segmented.
Right.
And there should be some money left. I'm hesitant to say at 10 o'clock at night with certainty, but I believe yes.
Well, it's only 9:40, you can
Yeah.
cry. Okay, yeah, I'm just not thinking straight, but I definitely want to
think
keep
you're
exploring.
absolutely right.
I think there is money available.
There was a
Yes.
lot of money available for consulting fees, and we moved half of it into the project budget and left some of it out.
That's
for-
what I wondered.
Yeah, so we should be okay in that
Okay.
regard. It's just like, I want to check tomorrow to make sure before I say yes with certainty.
When can we expect, in terms of the timeline, for this material to come back to us? Because it is, like our other budget issues, loaded with complications and traps of costing us more money. I saw that with our solar system. There was all of a sudden there was more money. Excuse me. So when can we expect that, in fact, this will come back to us? Summer?
What part are you, you mean like after?
After you guys talk, when are we going to get to hear what you have
It'd
come
only
up
take
with?
me a few days to put a proposal together, so
Oh.
that should come back to you within a week, I would think.
Proposal will come back, I don't want to speak for Tim, but hopefully the proposal comes back May 8th, if not the second May board meeting, which I think is the 22nd or something like that. The proposal, if you approve the proposal, that would put Kenwood Energy to work on developing further analysis.
And then that would take about no more than 6 months to get back to the board per that kind of outline that I had of the next steps.
So the second board meeting in May, did you say we would have something?
Yeah, first or second, May, depends on the
First or second.
turnaround time on the development, Kenwood's development of a proposal to continue to serve as consultant to the board.
Okay.
As much as we like Tim, I'm wondering if we aren't obligated to send RFPs out to, I don't know how many Tims there are out there, but
We did do an RFP when we selected Tim.
Yeah, I remember.
I need to get a handle on roughly what it's going to cost, and that'll determine whether or not we go to a public bid or not.
I thought we had to go out for a public bid.
We won't do anything we shouldn't do.
I like it when you say that. And then I'm wondering if you need further direction from the board. I'm a proponent of going for Marin, I can't even speak, clean energy. If we don't, if that's just a phone call and it's more efficient, better for the planet, we save a few bucks.
Do it.
Yeah, so.
We can do something.
Well, it's not an act, does it need to be an action item? It's not
No,
an action.
I don't, no.
Does it need to be?
No, it doesn't. I would ask that they work with us, though, because like you said, we still pay the T&D, and then we got to see what the gen costs are. I've done enough work down south with regards to looking at other providers. While it's certainly greener, that doesn't mean it's cheaper. So Terry could have a conniption if it goes way up.
Yeah, she
So-
won't be the only one.
Yeah.
So
no.
yes, and I don't know to the extent that you could just say, well, we changed our mind and want to go back to PG&E if it goes up. There may be longer contracts at play. And now, yes, it is greener. Whether it's cheaper or not, I have to see what you know.
I think they'd be happy to come here and talk with you and answer any of your questions, so.
Thank you. I want to spend more time reading.
Be on the agenda at the
I
beginning.
made it back halfway and then I put it down for some
All right.
reason.
To be continued.
Thank you. This was very helpful, very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very enlightening. And we're almost there.
We'll table that last one, because it.
We would like, okay, good. So we're going to.
Because it may take a while.
What?
Oh.
What?
There's, the reserve piece in there is added language. And
Okay.
If I had to guess this board,
And we're all very tired, so.
it's important.
All right, then.
So the
Not
third
now.
reading, so, thank you, everybody.